All right, everyone. Looks like we're about to get started. Chairman Moody, if you want to bring this meeting to order.
Good morning. I'm Greg Moody, Chairman of the Tennessee Board of Utility Regulation. I believe I detect a quorum. Ask Ross and staff to please call the roll.
I don't have that sheet in front of me. That's on me. So I'll just call it because everyone's here. I'll just call it down the line. Mr. Hampton,
Present.
Mr. Dye,
Here.
Mr. Smith,
Here.
Miss Vanisdale,
Here.
Miss Mitchell,
Here.
Mr. Moody,
Here.
Mr. Hampton, or Mr. Carter,
Here.
Mr. Giles,
Here.
Mr. Pelham,
Here.
Mr. Stone,
Here.
and Mr. Perky.
Here.
Chairman, you have a quorum.
Thank you very much. First item on the agenda this morning is the reading of our conflict of interest statement. Ask staff attorney to proceed.
The board was created to act for the public welfare in furtherance of the legislature's intent that utility systems be operated as self-sufficient enterprises. Board members are not authorized to participate in the discussion of or to vote on matters involving entities in which the board member has a financial interest, with which the board member has a conflict of interest, with which the board member has a contract of employment, or if there is any appearance of impropriety.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I've met our new attorney, but would you introduce him?
I'm going to let staff introduce our new attorney.
Sure thing, and thanks for bringing that up, Mr. Perky. For those of y'all that don't know, since the inception of the T-Board, and he was instrumental in creating the T-Board, Mr. Seth May was our prior counsel, and he had been with the Comptroller's office for quite some time, and Seth has recently moved on to work with the Ethics Commission. And so in that we had a vacancy, and so this is, I'll actually just let him introduce himself.
Hi, I'm Matt Napolitano. I come over from the federal government. I've been an attorney for almost 3 years now. Glad to take the reins from Seth. I worked under him as an intern, actually, here in 2022.
And so I was telling Matt that this is a great meeting for him to come to, because if y'all notice, we don't have a 600-page packet in front of us this time. So this is a good way to get his feet wet. So Chairman, I'm looking next, and it would be the approval of minutes is the next appropriate item, if you'd like to bring that up.
Thank you very much. Yes, the next item is the approval from our last meeting, which was October the 17th, 2025. You should have seen that in your packet. I will note that we adjourned, I believe, at 1:27 that day, so we're hoping for something just as good today, if not better than that, and I will entertain a motion for approval.
So moved. Second.
Excuse me, I'm sorry. May I make a motion for an edit, please?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And I'm sorry, I don't know the page number, but in the section relative to the Ocoee Utility District, there was a reference of a standard operating procedure. I would move to replace the word procedure with permit.
Okay. We can definitely take care of that, as long as y'all second that and want that change.
Mr. Chairman, I amend my motion to approve minutes with the noted correction.
Okay, so on that, Ms. Mitchell motioned to approve the minutes with the suggested change, and Mr. Pelham seconded.
Yeah.
And that's going to be a new practice before y'all vote on that. That's going to be a new practice that we have to do this meeting based on how we are doing the minutes moving forward. If Greg doesn't catch it, I'm going to try to catch it. We need to be announcing who is doing the motion in the second, because sometimes on the video it's hard for people to know who did what. So with that, it was Ms. Mitchell and Mr. Pelham for the motion in the second. But with that, Chairman, we do need a vote.
All right, very good. We have a motion from Ms. Mitchell, a second from Mr. Pelham. Any further discussion on the minutes? None being, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. The minutes are approved.
All right, Board, the next section I'm going to be passing off to Mr. Ben Johnson to be moving on through.
Good morning, everyone. Let's go ahead and hop into, well, it's our consent orders. It's after the minutes. All right. So the first one is our late audits. You'll remember we have a referral now for those.
Mr. Chairman, what page are we on?
20.
Page 20. Yep. Sorry, Mr. Perky. I'll try and do better about the page numbers as we go here. So page 20 was our first consent agenda item. And this is for multiple entities that were able to get their audits caught back up, turned in. And so with this, we're just going to go ahead and recommend to release them from this order.
Mr. Chairman, I've moved to accept staff recommendation.
I second Eugene.
Thank you. We have a motion from Mr. Perky, a second from Mr. Hampton to approve the release of the late audits. Any further discussion? None being, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
All righty. On 21, we also have another consent agenda item. This is our decrease in net position. We have multiple entities that have complied with previous board orders, and they are in better shape. And we are now just asking that they get placed into the update cycle so that we can continue to see their improvement and, hopefully release them later on. But right now, put them in the update cycle.
Mr. Chairman, I'll make that motion that we accept the staff's recommendation. Mr. Smith?
I second.
We have a motion from Mr. Smith and a second from Mr. Dye to approve the release of the decrease in net position. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries.
All right. On to page 22. This is another one related to decrease in net position. We have multiple entities that have fulfilled everything that was board ordered. They've had 2 years of positive net position, and we are going to go ahead and fully release them. And that would be our recommendation, to fully release them at this point.
I'll entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to accept staff's recommendation for releasing these entities. Steve Stone.
I'll second.
All right, we have a motion from Steve Stone, a second from Miss Vanisdale to approve the release of the decrease in net position. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion is approved.
All right. So here, another consent agenda item. We have a training, and I'm going to go ahead and just read this. These entities were referred to the board for failure to comply with training requirements. And what we are asking is that, well, this is an outdated. Does that need to be updated, Nate? It says August 31st, 25. Do we want to use a different date than that? Is that supposed to be 26?
April.
Okay. So the recommendation should actually be April 30th, 2026. The utilities shall provide to board staff that they are in compliance with applicable training requirements. And then we've also got a recommendation, should they fail to comply with that, we should issue subpoenas for them to appear before the board. So correction there, April 30th, 2026 is our recommendation to get their training corrected.
This is Paula Mitchell. I'll make
Yes.
a motion to accept staff recommendations with a minor change of by April 30th, 2026.
I'll second the motion.
All right, we have a motion from Ms. Mitchell and a second for Mr. Perky to accept staff recommendation on referring the training for the multiple entities. Any further discussion?
Mr. Chairman, may I ask a question?
Yes.
Johnson, do you know on this one, I think the law changed where I think the first cycle, board members and council members now only have to have 12, but then ever rolling 3 thereafter is 6 hours. Do we know, is this just the initial, or is this some people that are repeatedly off? Because I think the law changed to make it even easier.
Yeah, they did. And so a lot of them failed when the law was still 12, and now we moved into the 6. So we're just asking that they simply get that 6 hours. It's kind of how the timeline switched on us with the law there. But, we're just simply asking them to get 6 hours to get back in compliance.
One last question. I think the board was before. There was an issue when some training people were zip flashing through the online training and basically they were just lying, right? People were speeding through and clicking yes and going through.
That's
Has
correct.
that been resolved in this, or is this any of those same cases? Do we know?
Nate, do you want to speak to that?
Sure. So all of the cases, to my understanding, that are on this consent order right here are the result of individuals who, like you said, didn't actually complete the training in the required time. I will make one note before we continue. The town of Gibson, city of Lobelville, and the metropolitan government of Hartsville and Trousdale counties, those three, the local or the individuals did complete 6 hours or more, but they did not complete all the hours that they took under the required time. So that was open to discussion by the board if y'all want to remove them from this recommendation because they've completed the Tennessee code requirement, but they didn't complete all the training that they were in violation of.
So they've completed the training that they're required to now, but they did not complete the training that they were required to prior to the law change.
Correct.
I would make a motion to remove those entities so that we don't muddle the this order. So if they're in compliance now, there's no need to chase them down.
That's right.
So we need an amended motion then, I believe.
So which entities are those?
Gibson.
It's Gibson, Lobelville, and the metropolitan government of Hartsville and Trousdale County.
So, board, because of the nature of what a consent agenda is, we're just going to remove this topic right now. And whenever I come back up, we'll handle this one.
All right.
Okay? So we can move on to the next one.
No, thank you very much.
Yeah. So sticking with training, this next one, you'll see multiple entities here. These have all come into compliance with previous training non-compliance. And so we are just removing all of these from under the board. It would be a release order for these entities.
I'll entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion, Steve Stone, to release these entities from the requirement.
Eugene Hampton, second.
All right, we have a motion from Mr. Stone, a second from Mr. Hampton to release these entities from the training deficiencies. Any further discussion?
Mr. Chairman, my utility was on the list. We had a zip thrower board member, and he fixed it. But is it a conflict of interest if I vote on this?
I would recuse yourself.
Thank you. I'll do that. I'll recuse myself.
Thank you. So noted. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
All right. And the last consent agenda item here is for water loss. Previously, we still have a list of those that had excessive water loss, and we have a group here that have brought that threshold down from improvements that they made to their systems. And so we are seeing that those numbers are better for 2 consecutive years, and we are going to go ahead and release them from our water loss order.
Mr. Chairman, I move to accept staff recommendation and release these utilities from oversight. Anthony Pelham.
Yep, Paula Mitchell seconds.
All right, we have a motion from Mr. Pelham, a second from Ms. Mitchell to release these entities from the water loss deficiencies. Any further discussion? None being, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
All right. Well, that is the last item there. We're going to go ahead and move on to our customer complaint section, and I'm going to turn it back to Ross here, and that's on 27.
All right, board, and just to circle back right quick to the training one that we skipped over. So on page 23 of your packet, we have the recommendation in which we would be asking by April 30th, 2026, the utilities listed that the board members of the governing bodies are in compliance with applicable training requirements. Mr. Hampton, based on the information that Mr. Fontenot presented, requested that we remove the town of Gibson, Lobelville, and the metropolitan government of Hartsville and Trousdale County. I'm fine with that. So with that being said, would we be removing them entirely and we have no recommendation against those 3 cities because they're technically in compliance?
Correct. They would need to be released.
They would need to be released. So we're going to have two recommendations based on this. The first thing that I'm going to recommend, board, is I would like for the board to release Gibson, Lobelville, and the Metropolitan Government of Hartsville and Trousdale County for their training cases because they are now in compliance. And I'm seeking a motion and a second on that.
Mr. Chairman, Anthony Pelham, I would make a motion to release Gibson, Lobelville, and Metropolitan Government of Hartsville and Trousdale County for their training cases.
I, Eugene Hampton, second.
All right, we have a motion and a second to accept staff recommendation to remove these three entities from the training oversight. Any further discussion? None being, all those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
And now I would like to take up what is still remaining on page 23, and the remainder of those entities, we would like to order that by April 30th, 2026, that we receive proof that all of their governing body members are in compliance.
Mr. Hampton.
So these still had met 6.
Yes.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah, it's really, but after this year, everything should be fine. We're just in that weird transition year from 12 to 6.
Mr. Chairman, Anthony Pelham, I would make the motion to accept modified staff recommendation that by April 30th, 2026, the named utilities provide adequate training.
I'll make this second. Alex Smith.
We have a motion by Mr. Pelham, a second by Mr. Smith to accept staff recommendation on these training requirements with the modified date of April the 30th, 26. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
All right, board. The next thing that we're on to is going to be page 27 of your packet. We have a customer complaint in front of us regarding the Center Grove Winchester Springs Utility District. However, before we get into that, I think that it's topical that we have a discussion on how we deal with customer complaints moving forward, because we as board staff are receiving a plethora of these customer complaints where they're all the same. It's, I had a water leak. I reported it to the utility followed their leak adjustment policy, and in this instance, it's all, we have Servline, we have leak insurance, and they got their reimbursement, and then the customer just wants more. And based on prior cases, the board has voted that no, having Servline and using Servline as your leak protection is an adequate policy. And so I think that it is not a great use of our time to bring a case up that the precedent has already established how it's going to go. However, the statute requires that we recommend to the board that an informal hearing be had. So what I would propose to do is whenever we receive a complaint, well, there's multiple ways to go about it. And my opinion has changed from yesterday until now after a conversation that I had with Matt. So what I think the best path forward is when we receive a complaint, we put it on the next TBOR agenda. We do not invite the complainant or the utility to complete their case. Instead, I will ask the board in a very short manner, because y'all will have the information prior, whether or not you want to hear it at the next meeting. And so that way, it has come in front of the board and y'all have given it an opportunity to see if it needs to be heard or not. And it could be something similar to how a consent agenda item would go. Because, you know, if it gets to the point where we have 8 cases in front of us where it's, well, we got Servline, but it wasn't enough. I mean, it's very difficult for us to, you know, have time to deal with that and then the other business that we have. So that is my thought on the best way to proceed to make sure that the customers and the utilities are given their due time in front of the board, but also to preserve our time in dealing with other matters. So that is my suggestion, but I'm open to recommendations from y'all.
Question?
Mr. Giles?
So as part of your information that you provide, whether you will evaluate whether or not policy's been followed and all those things and give us all the pertinent information so we can make a decision, correct?
Yeah, correct. So right now, we try to not opine on the way the board should go. However, moving forward, what we'll do is we'll do all the fact finding and then we'll give a recommendation on whether we think the board should move forward or not. and go about it that way. So we're not going to be as neutral. Instead, we're going to review the facts and present the facts, and then you'll decide if we should have a case about it.
Mr. Pelham.
Ross, in that scenario, if you presented, let's just say your example, you had 8 that were similar, and the board decided they didn't want to hear that, would that satisfy this board's obligation to the utility and to the customer? Because if they follow the policy's not discriminatory and it's compliant with law, whether we like it or don't like it, I don't know that I have an opinion that this board should act. But if we acted and said, no, we don't want to bring them, does that allow it to be closed and dismissed?
Yeah, the statute just says that the board staff has to recommend the complaint get an informal hearing. It doesn't say the board has to then have an informal hearing. It just has to be recommended by the board staff.
So to answer your question, yeah, we could. By doing that, that satisfies our statutory requirement.
Mr. Perky.
Mr. Chairman, I agree with Ross and my colleagues. I would be in favor of pushing everything that we can to the local level. And if policies are in place, it may not be the ideal policy in the eyes of the ratepayer, but if the policies are in place, I think what he's suggesting is a fair review. And I also, I have to say this, local boards have authority to move beyond their policies. And if they don't, we do that from time to time at Morristown Utility System, not often, but if they don't see the need to do that, and again, they have a policy in place, I don't see the reason for us to conduct these exhaustive hearings. So I would be very much in favor of that.
Mr. Hampton.
All right, so, okay, so a timeline. So like, we'll say ratepayer, like we'll use this meeting. So ratepayer sends you information January 2nd.
Okay.
All
They'd
right,
be
so
on, yes.
this year, like, so, which would be ample time to put it on this meeting.
Yeah.
They would, your group would review it,
Yep.
provide a recommendation,
Yep.
and that recommendation would show up at this meeting.
Yes.
And then without the ratepayer or the utility district.
Correct.
So then if we say yes, if we say yes, we would like to hear from them, they would then be put on the next meeting, which will estimate July,
June.
July,
July,
you know,
July,
I'm
whatever.
just making like
yeah.
it, so
no,
it would be
and that was one of my reservations when I talked to Matt
Okay.
is, I don't want to become a. Listen, the courts don't work because they take forever to get things
Yeah.
done, and I don't want to be a system where it's we'll make the complaint and then maybe we'll get a decision in 2 years. But in my opinion, the 3-month lag between when we could get it and then the next meeting, because we're trying to have meetings every 3 months.
Yeah.
I think that is worthwhile to preserve our time. I think that's going to be the best way moving forward.
Okay, I just want to.
Yeah,
hear
no,
the
that's
timeline,
exactly how
because
that would work.
If we take this option, we're basically pushing anyone that we think is a valid complaint. It now becomes a potential 4 to 6 months out before they've ever spoken to us.
Yeah.
And the potential harm or whatever it is, like some of them haven't paid. So then the utility district.
So I do want to be clear. If it is an instance in which the utility, let's say it's one of these leak adjustment disputes, and the utility has that customer shut off because they're not paying their bill, and there is some sort of, speed necessary to resolve this, then we can go ahead and say, listen, that guy hasn't had water for 2 months. Like we should probably hear this one just so we can get that going. But in these instances, these customers, whether they either paid it or the utility has said, okay, we'll hold on. Look, we're not going to shut you off, but this balance is going to remain until we get a decision from the T-Board.
Okay.
So
I just wanted to make sure that we're still balancing.
Yes.
Because we don't want anyone unnecessarily out of water or whatever utility that we're brought before us.
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
May I ask one of the questions?
Mr. Pelham.
Ross, I think this process would allow, but I would also respectfully ask that, before customer complaints make it to this board, that they have clearly been in front of that local utility board and that they've had action, even if they did no action, they've at least heard it in.
Yeah, generally, whenever we even get the complaint to begin with, we either, one, hear it from the utility that this has been in front of the board, or the complainant sends us minutes showing that it's, so yeah, that's a big check before it even gets here, so. But that doesn't necessarily require a vote. I think that I just wanted to get y'all's opinion and make sure y'all were comfortable. I mean, does that need to be memorialized or anything? No? Okay. So, all right. Well, that's how it's going to go moving forward. Regardless, though, we got a chunk in front of us today that we're hoping to move through because they're all very similar. And so we're going to begin with the Center Grove Winchester Springs Utility District. And I will point out that Mr. Dewey Brandstetter, a constant T-Bor flyer, is here, and he's here on behalf of the Center Grove Winchester Springs Utility District. He's available to answer any questions you may have. However, board, these cases are pretty straightforward, and the ones that aren't, we'll make sure to tell you. But in this instance, the customer got a call from the utility and said, hey, your meter's spinning. And the customer, a bunch of people walked around the property, never found a leak. Then the meter stopped spinning. The utility pulled the meter, had the meter tested. The meter is fine. So there was some sort of leak somewhere because the meter doesn't test fine and then, not like have a reason that it was spinning. Regardless, though, the customers contend that the leak adjustment isn't enough that they received, but the utility has followed its policy, and board staff doesn't believe that there should be any further action. And so if you have the other thing that I failed to mention at the beginning of the meeting, if you're online and you are requested to speak by the board, you're going to need to hit the raise your hand button or type something in the chat saying that you would wish to speak. If the board wants you to speak, and then we'll have to unmute you from there. Regardless, though, board, if you have questions for Mr. Brandstetter, the utility, or the customer, we can attempt to see if they're online. Otherwise, the facts of the matter are as presented, and the board doesn't recommend any action.
Thoughts, board?
I make a motion that we follow staff recommendation.
I second.
All right, we have a motion for Mr. Giles, a second for Mr. Hampton to accept board recommendation and take no action on this customer complaint. Any further discussion? None being, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries.
All right, board. Mr. Brandstetter, it's good to see you. You're more than welcome to hang out as long as you'd like, but... All right, DeKalb Utility District. So, board, this is another instance of a leak in which the utility offered, the same serve line protection, and board staff believes that the customer had a leak. Everything got fixed. The leak adjustment, the leak insurance wasn't enough, and the customer would like more of a reimbursement. Board staff does not recommend any action against the utility. We should close the case, and I will say that there are individuals from the DeKalb Utility District here, if you'd like to hear from them, or we can check with the individuals online. However, the facts as presented in the board packet are correct, and the board staff doesn't recommend any action. Let me close the case.
Mr. Chairman, this is Candace Vanisdale. I'll make a motion to accept staff recommendation to no action.
I'll second that, Alex Smith.
All right, we have a motion from Ms. Vanisdale, a second from Mr. Smith to accept board recommendation on this customer complaint to take no action. Further discussion? None being, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries.
All right, board, moving on to page 52 of the packet, we have the town of Englewood. And so this is another scenario in which, actually, this one has a bit more numbers, so let's just read through it to make sure we're doing the same thing here. The first billing period of October 21st through November 25th reflected an increase from $47.38 to $51.89 and a charge of $700. The second billing period of November to December reflected an increase of $51.89 to $60.12. Ms. Snell disputes the accuracy of the second bill, noting that the leak was repaired on November 25th, the same day as the billing period. The utility maintains that the bill is accurate based on the meter readings. She states that no explanation has been provided as to why the second month's usage was nearly double the prior month despite the repair. She's provided documentation from the contractor confirming the repair was completed, and the department issued an estimated $500 credit. The total charges for the 2 months exceeded $2,000, which she has paid. And so she's requesting a review of the billing accuracy and the utility's handling of her complaint. So on that one, board, she does kind of have a point of if it got fixed on this date, why? But I think that this could be an instance of billing cycles overlapping and everything. So with that in mind, board, I would say that we take no action on this and let board staff confirm if this is a billing cycle issue, and then we'll take this up at the next board meeting.
Mr. Pelham.
Mr. Chairman, if I may make one comment, this may be just a suggestion. Sometimes the dates that are shown on the bill or the bill date lag whatever the reading date is. And
Sure.
I've seen utilities that lag as much as 2, even 3 weeks from the reading date to the bill process date that's there. So I think paying close attention to the actual meter reading date if they have that work order. And if I may ask one other question, if we continue this one, reading through their policy and reading this one, I don't understand the estimated $500 credit. That seemed to be an arbitrary number that didn't seem to follow policy. And so that one, at least in my understanding, it didn't seem that they had a clear policy or leak adjustment form method that they did. And so with that, I would be willing to make the adjustment to, would you say, to
So what board staff will plan on doing, and this will be our recommendation, that we take no formal action on this, and instead board staff is directed to verify that the billing dates and everything are correct, that the billing cycles match up. We will look into what their policy is as to why they received a $500 adjustment to ensure that that's not arbitrary. And I think that's it. I think that's
Mr. Chairman, I would make that motion to take no formal action now and authorize staff to further validate the information and then come back at the next meeting.
Bruce Giles, second.
All right, we have a motion by Mr. Pelham, a second by Mr. Giles to accept staff recommendation to research, take no action today, but research policy and the dates of this particular instance. Any further discussion? None being, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries.
All right, board, moving on to page 67, we have the town of Mason, another frequent flyer in front of the T-Board. This time it's for a new customer complaint. I'm just going to read this staff summary to get it all out there for the record because I think that's prudent. Stacy Sims submitted a complaint to the T-Board regarding disputed water bills issued by the town of Mason. She reports that her monthly bill, which is typically around $60, increased to amounts ranging from $150 to $400 over a period of approximately 3 months. Upon reviewing her statement, she observed that the meter readings listed on her bills reflected 7 digits, while her physical water meter displayed only 6 digits. At one point, she was billed for approximately 100,000 gallons. The utility attributed the high bills to a possible leak. However, Ms. Sims states that a plumber inspected her property and found no leak, and she notes there was no visible flooding or other indication of water loss. She further asserts that when she inspected the meter herself, it appeared not to have been regularly accessed. Despite being told by the mayor that her water service would not be disconnected while the issue was being reviewed, her service was shut off and she incurred late fees and reconnection charges. After approximately 3 months of elevated bills, the utility replaced the meter. Following the replacement, her bills decreased significantly, with her most recent bill totaling $40 and reflecting usage from the new meter only. Although the remaining balance associated with the prior readings was removed, Ms. Sims seeks reimbursement for payments she made that she believes were based on incorrect meter readings. She states that when she presented her concerns and documentation to the local utility board on December 15th, no explanation was provided regarding the discrepancy in meter digits and no resolution was reached. The customer is seeking to be reimbursed for excessive charges over the 3-month period in question. Based on the facts presented, I do think that the customer deserves a reimbursement. Here's the problem, though, is I don't know how much. Because if the previous meter was reading inaccurately, it might be hard to discern the exact amount that it needs to be adjusted. So instead of the board right now trying to say exactly how much it should be, what I would recommend is board staff is directed to figure out, like, on average, how much this customer is generally using. Take that amount, apply that to what she should have paid, figure out how much she actually paid, and ask the utility to reimburse everything in between. Because, clearly there was an issue. And again, this is a utility that is, renowned for having some of the worst utility issues in Tennessee. So I think that this should be remedied in favor of the customer, but the question is by how much. So I would ask that board staff is directed to work with the town to figure out how to remedy this to the customer's satisfaction. That's fair for both parties, but make sure it's to the customer's satisfaction.
Mr. Pelham.
So, and I do not want to offend the intelligence of some of our other board members that aren't utility managers and deal with this stuff every day, because I know some are probably more experienced than me. Part of the argument here was that the missing digit, if you have a manual style read meter that has an analog sweep hand, there's a lot that still have a fixed zero, and some have 2 zeros depending on the rotation of that analog sweep arm. Especially if it has looks like the analog odometer of an old truck, like you're looking at mileage when it counts up. So that argument, but I would tend to agree with you. I don't see anything that they have a policy. It doesn't look like they pulled the meter and tested it. They don't know if it was accurate and have no history. And then Mason's history is there. I don't know, other than averaging Ross as your suggestion, I don't know how else you would come to a fair number.
Yeah, I think that's going to be the best path forward. And, after having the meter being replaced and then everything goes back to normal and they never tested the old meter, that's just kind of a red flag for me, in my opinion. So I would just like for us to dive more into it.
Ross, I'd also like that the statement appears that it had not been regularly accessed. If that's the case, then they've been fraudulently putting documentation down that is not real. It'd be interesting while you're there for them to report to you how often they read these meters and what their process is for doing so.
And
how old the meters are as well.
Sure. No, we can get all of that information, and we will also request, I'm trying to think of the best way to word it, pretty much the readings on that every month to see if it seems like there's a pattern by which the numbers were established. Yeah, we'll look more into it, board. But as of right now, I don't recommend we close the case. I just ask that y'all direct us to work with the town to fix this in benefit of the customer, assuming everything that we find out still illustrates that the town is kind of at fault for this or did not do this correctly.
Mr. Hampton.
And so, unlike the previous cases, no one from that's on either side is here for this one, correct?
Is there anyone from Mason or Miss Sims online?
Okay. That's all right.
No?
Thank you.
Yeah.
Any further discussion, board? Mr. Pelham.
I would move to accept staff recommendation, authorize them to validate the readings, the timelines, and method, and then, based on their discretion and judgment, work through a resolution to come back to the average bill for the customer and credit back the appropriate amount as deemed necessary by staff.
Stone seconds the motion.
All right, we have a motion from Mr. Pelham, a second from Mr. Stone to accept staff recommendation on the issue with the town of Mason to go back and get with the utility, research historical usage, and determine a appropriate refund. Any further discussion? None being, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries.
All right, board, we're gonna do Rocky Top next. So the city of Rocky Top, you may recall, was kind of discussed at a previous meeting, but the individuals representing both the complainant and the utility were online, and we were unable to hear them because of the technical issues. So this complaint is back in front of us. Essentially what we have here is we have a landlord that owns a piece of property. The tenant that lived there broke up the lock on, someone is raising their hand. So I see whoever's raising their hand online. If the board requests to hear from y'all, we'll make sure you get a turn, but just want to let you know we see you. So you have a landlord, owns a piece of property, you got a tenant. The tenant, whether broke the lock, broke the meter, whatever, doesn't matter. There's a bill that was left unpaid with the city. The city was owed money by the tenant. Well, the tenant left town, and now the landlord still owns the property, and the city wants to charge the landlord for the bill from the tenant. Board staff doesn't find that to be appropriate. The account is for the tenant. It is not for the landlord, because it is very clear that it is the tenant's name that was on the account. It is the city's policy that this is how they do. This is what they do. That it's the landlord's responsibility. Board staff doesn't think that's right, and our attorney has actually looked into it. I don't know if you want to offer your opinion here, Matt.
Just generally, a utility cannot force a landlord to pay a tenant's unpaid bill. That would have to be done through private contract agreement with the landlord. The landlord could voluntarily pay that bill, but there's not a legal avenue for them to force this landlord to pay for the tenant. And I will note that there's a Sixth Circuit decision that does not allow utilities to refuse to give service to new customers that reside at a specific location just because there's an unpaid bill from a former customer that used to live there.
And so the one other thing that I'll add is if you go to page 72, it shows some of their policies and charges for new service, such as upon leasing a property, the landlord must ensure the tenants have registered the lease with the city, provide contact info, and indicate whether utility accounts are to remain in the landlord's name or be transferred to the tenants. And a lot of the language in that section of the policy is about, transferring the account to the tenants and such. And again, all of the information that we've seen that board staff has been provided, the account was in the tenant's name. So with that, board, I'm happy to take questions, but it also appears that we have someone online that can.
May I ask one question about that policy?
Yeah.
I was trying to think of the way we do things. Is there intent there to make the landlord responsible for that? Or is it to try to protect the landowner? When we require people to produce the lease, it's to prevent squatters or people that would move in. And so we either show proof of ownership or that they've got a lease agreement that says, hey, now we know you have proper right to be at this property to take a service in your name.
Yeah, I don't really know what the city's intent there is. Is there? Might be a good question for them. I don't. So, Nate, why don't we unmute one of those and let's play a little, if that's okay with the board, we'll play a little roulette, unmute one of them and see which side of the coin it's on. How's that?
Please proceed.
All right. Let's see what we got here. All right, one of y'all's unmuted. Why don't you go ahead and try to chime in here and we'll see if we can hear you.
Okay, hello?
Oh, hello. Who do we got here?
Oh, hi. Hi, I'm Bradley Utley. I filed the complaint order with Ben. He's been real helpful to me. I've gathered my information. It actually it's kind of originated back in September the 12th of 2023. I have a small park there that is on city water and sewer, and I had a a late afternoon water pipe bust, and it was pretty major, and the city come down, got their equipment, and they did the repair work and then sent me a bill for it. And I thought, well, I don't really think I'm supposed to pay that, but just to be in good standings, I'll do it. I've read in the paper their budget's kind of tight and they're having a lot of leakage, so I went ahead and paid it. It was $1,584, and then not too long, September the 28th of 23, I've got a rental house there that the one in September 28, 23, they replaced 3 meters at a part of the park that I own, and it's on city water, city sewer. So they replaced those and charged me $600 and 5.5 hours overtime, which was $756.75. And I paid it and just said, okay, I'll pay it. If they're out that and they feel like I should pay it, I will. But I'm thinking I'm not, my infrastructure, that's their job. I'm responsible from the meter onward. So then I got another bill, 2824 from them on they charged me for a meter, a line, a retrofit dial. I got it. I sent Ben a copy, but it was like $1,067. So that was at the rental house that I have, and so I paid that and just kind of forgot about everything. And then when I had this situation where the tenant he did not get the water turned in his name, and then he left. They said that I had a renter lined up, and they said we will not put that in their name till this bill gets paid. So that's what really kind of like flipped the switch for me. And then I went back on these 3 invoices and started looking up what costs were, and like they uppriced me a lot. Like there was a
Mr. Utley. I have a question.
Yes, sir. Okay. Yes.
So first, and this is honestly the crux of the question, but I think what you just told us is going to lead into another issue.
Okay.
And so, but when the tenant left, whose name was on the account?
It was the last name would have been the previous tenant.
So your name was not on the account, sir?
No, my name was not. No.
Okay.
Sir.
Thank you. So with that, board, I want to talk about the other stuff about what he's getting charged for to replace all that infrastructure. We're not going to resolve that today because I don't know. That leads a lot of questions. I just think board staff going to have to look into that. However, the main question here is whether or not his name was on the account. I mean, that's really what this boils down to. And he just said that his name was not on it. It was the previous renters that were on it. So, I mean, I think that absolves him of any issues, and that shouldn't prevent him from getting new renters into his property. However, does anyone else have any questions for him, not regarding the installation and all that, because again, that's going to be a whole other discussion about this matter and the meter and the billing.
Mr. Hampton.
Ratepayer, the gentleman's name again?
Mr. Utley?
Mr. Utley, do you
Yes,
currently, is there a tenant in this property at this time, or is the water on?
Yes, sir, it is.
Okay, thank you.
So board staff's recommendation is going to change by the time we get to the end of this. But until then, do y'all have any other questions for Mr. Utley, or would you like to hear from the city of Rocky Top, who I believe is online?
I only have one other question, and this would be just from my experience with landlords. Does he have kind of a standing other agreement that if people move in and out, that it would automatically switch back to his name, that he would be responsible for service to avoid service fees of turn on, turn off, cycling new? Do they do anything similar to that to avoid the water being off for a time period?
Mr. Utley, did you hear that question? Do you have a response, or would you like me to clarify?
Well, so the way we've always done it is I paid $50 for a 3-day cleaning fee. So they turn it on temporarily, give me 3 days, and turn it off. Or maybe 5 days. I don't. It's something 3 to 5 days. Yeah.
But there's no automatic transition back and forth. If
No.
a tenant moves out, you don't have. There's not a
No.
policy that allows
No.
the transition
No.
back and forth. Okay.
No, like all the other cities do. Well, I would be happy to do that. Yeah.
Sure. Okay. Well, with that, board, does anyone have any other questions for Mr. Utley, or would we like to hear from the city at this point?
I think we'll hear from the city at this point.
Okay. Nate, if you would like to unmute the other party. And I believe you're unmuted if you'd like to chime in. You still need to unmute yourself. There we go.
Hello.
All right, we hear you loud and clear. If you wouldn't mind introducing yourself, that would be great.
Yes, I am Mike Ellis. I'm city manager for the city of Rocky Top. And what's in question here is there was no account, period. There was nobody's name. There was no account. The tenant that was there broke the lock. Our police officers served a warrant on him, and that's how we found out about it. And then the district attorney's office called us, told us to charge Mr. Utley, and then the tenant would be reimbursed Mr. Utley.
So to be clear, there was no...
And so that's what we did.
Sure. So there was no name on the account. You just charged...
There was no name, there was no account, period.
The tenant did not come and set the account up.
Yes, the tenant did not come and set the account up.
Okay. All right.
So who was prior to that tenant then? I mean, at some point, someone had to have an account there.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes, I do not know. That would...
The previous tenant's account was terminated when they moved out. So we just assumed that the property was empty. And then we find out that there's somebody living there, but they never came and set up their account with us.
Mr. Ellis, this is David Perkey. Has the criminal matter been mitigated?
I believe so. I'm not sure.
If so, did they order restitution?
They did to Mr. They said they would to Mr. Utley, yes.
But it's fair to say you don't know the disposition of the case. Is that correct?
Exactly.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
So, board, after hearing that, and after talking with Matt, it seems like there is... Actually, you know what, Matt, why don't you go ahead, and then I'm going to go with the layman's terms of how I'd like to proceed.
With the new information that there was no account in the tenant's name, it seems right that it would go to the property owner as the bill person, Mr. Utley in this case, and then he would need to go into civil court to get restitution from the tenant that has, from my understanding, has been convicted and been told to give restitution.
And so the way that I'm thinking about that, board, is let's say that I got a piece of rental property. I got a house and someone rents it and they move out and they close their account. And then let's say that I have a big leak at my property. Like I didn't really have for some reason there was a leak past the meter. I'm responsible for that. Even though my tenant left, somehow there was still a leak on my property. Like that's still water that went through my meter. But now the issue is someone turned that meter on that was not supposed to. And what we're getting from legal is that is a dispute between the landlord, the property owner, and the quote unquote tenant. And so that isn't a responsibility of the city to solve that on behalf of the landlord. The landlord needs to pursue that from the individual who because, you know, if you owned a piece of property, and I went out there and turned your meter on, even though you weren't home, it was vacant, and then I opened up a spigot, utility's sending you a bill. And then it's going to be on you to get that money from me for doing something to your property. That's kind of the way that I'm viewing it. So that is kind of a new light. However, I don't think I want to close City of Rocky Top. I want us to do more information about what he was saying about the stuff that he was paying on the meter and getting stuff replaced. Right now is not the time because we're going to get a lot of he said, she said. And I think that that board staff should put together more information about what he was talking about and then bring that in front of the board. Now, with that being said, that's just my recommendation. My recommendation is he needs to get the money from the previous tenant or the ex-tenant, or maybe he was never technically a tenant. I don't really know. Whoever turned that water on. He needs to work and get restitution for that. However, board staff should work to figure out why he's paying for work on the other side of the meter. That's how I would like to proceed, but open to hear what the board has to say.
Ms. Vansdale.
I'm just, this is Miss Vanisdale. I was thinking in the last agenda package, when they weren't able to speak on the telephone, that we may have had more receipts and information on those prior charges. So some of this may have already been started.
Okay.
I just wanted to bring that back up.
We'll go and review all of that. If I had to guess, we probably haven't gotten a complete narrative, and we need a succinct, here's what happened kind of thing. And so board staff would like to put that together to bring in front of the board.
Mr. Perky.
Mr. Ellis, what I'm about to say is not me advocating that you do this. It is a question for clarity. Do you have the authority as city manager to settle this with Mr. Utley? With some agreement?
I would say that the city council would be the one that has the authority to do that.
Okay, that's fair. Again, I'm not advocating that. I'm just looking for clarity. Thank you.
And board, if it's the temperature of the board that we think they should work with Mr. Utley on this instance where someone was stealing water from his property, essentially, whether or not we can force them to do that, that's a question, or we can, really heavily implore them to do so while we work on investigating this other stuff. So just keep that as an option. Moving forward.
Any other questions for Mr. Ellis?
Or Mr. Utley?
Or Mr. Utley, yes.
Or board staff?
Carter.
Before y'all vote on the invoices, I'll look at the invoices and then I will work with Mr. Utley. I can work with Mr. Utley on that. I'll go back and look at them because I don't know what was. That might have been before my time.
Sure. Well, yeah, Mr. Ellis, I appreciate that, and I'll let you know. Board staff is going to be involved in that as well to make sure that we can relay to the board what happened at the next meeting. But really appreciate that offer.
Okay.
Edwin Carter, is it appropriate for us to let the staff even do more research on this criminal complaint or case to see if there's documentation actually, because we're hearing what they're saying from both sides? But it's appropriate to let staff research this as well to make sure that the facts are the facts.
Fine with that. So what we could do at the request of Mr. Carter is really come to y'all at the next meeting with a full brief to deal with both this maybe criminal, maybe not criminal, so on and so forth, and then deal with the potential charges or fees that he had to pay for. So essentially, we're just going to go home and do some homework. We're come back to y'all in 3 months. How's that?
I'll entertain a motion.
I had one other question for that. I just want to make sure, I think Mr. Hampton addressed it, but I want to make sure that Mr. Utley's not being restricted from being able to serve or have a tenant there and harm him by not having service. So
yes,
I think he affirmed that he did have it,
Yeah.
but I just want to make sure there was not another holdup.
So, and for those folks online, don't really need a whole lot of answer, just need a quick yes or no. Basically from the city of Rocky Top. Do y'all have any intention of restricting Mr. Utley's ability to rent his property out or anything until this is resolved? Yes or no? We're just going to issue an order that they can't. And we're just going to move on because
Wait, I'm here. What was the question?
we just want to make sure that y'all aren't restricting Mr. Utley's ability to rent the property out or anything until we get this matter
Oh, no.
solved.
He's got a tenant there now, I'm pretty sure.
Okay, fantastic. Well, we just want to make sure that ain't going to change. So with that, board, do we want to put an order together on what the board staff's got to do there, or do you just want to move on? What do you think?
I think we do an order.
Okay, so with that, board staff is recommending that we don't take any action on whether we close the case, and we don't take any action against the city. Instead, I'm requesting that the board order board staff to research two things. One, what actually happened with the criminal or potential criminal? I don't really know what term I'm even allowed to use right now. But the whole alleged theft of water and all that, and really understand, has that person been charged? Has that case been solved? What kind of restitution was ordered? Was it paid? So on and so forth. And then as far as what's being paid, what was paid in the years prior by the customer for work done, not on his side of the meter, or replacing meters, replacing lines. I don't know. There's a lot going on there. So with that, that is the recommendation, board.
Mr. Chairman, Ms. Candace Vanisdale, I'll make a motion to approve staff recommendation.
Paula Mitchell, I'll make a second.
All right, we have a motion from Ms. Vanisdale, a second from Ms. Mitchell to go with staff recommendations on this issue, twofold, to do further research with the potential criminal water theft, and research the invoices as well. Any further discussion? None being, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries.
All right, board. Well, that reaches where I'm going to hand it off back to Ben. Ben is going to come up here and talk about the Minor Hill Utility District, and then he's going to move through East Tennessee. So, Ben, take it away.
So, Minor Hill on page 74 here. This one's pretty similar as well to what happened. We do have a customer that called in, Keely Mendez, and she states that in November 2025, her water bill totaled $373, in which that was significantly higher than her typical 75 to 110. There was like a 15,000 gallons reflected in this, and she states that no repairs were made at her residence, and then that when her meter was reread, a usage returned to normal levels. So after obtaining 3 years of usage history, she asserts the consumption had never previously reached that level, even when filling her swimming pool, and that there was a faulty meter read. She alleges that the district also improperly applied tax to customer bills by charging rates described as tax included when the taxing the total amount, resulting in double taxation. Additionally, she challenges the rate structure itself, starting at the 41 minimum for the first 1,500 gallons, and 15.56 per 1,000 is excessive, as well as the $100 disconnect and reconnect fee. What the district responded with was she was offered leak adjustment per their policy, which she declined. And so, they did have a policy there. In that the meter was not altered, and that the elevated consumption appeared isolated to the November billing period, is what they say. Regarding taxation, there was an error that the district did confirm, and they, implemented a recent rate increase. But they did take care of it. They said that on the double taxation, and I believe they provided that back to her. There was a recent rate increase. But what I will say is that they're also financially distressed. So they're in the middle of going through a rate study right now, which we'll be certainly looking at. And that could change, but it also may be justified based on this rate study. But Ms. Mendez is seeking review of the November 2025 charges and related fees. From what we gather, it looks as though the district was able to follow their policy, offered her protection, but she didn't want to take on that the leak protection that was offered. And so I'm not sure what else can be said about their rates. Again, they're in the middle of a rate study, and I think that we're going to have to address that down the road with what will be established. And so with that said, we don't really have any recommendation to take any action on this case. Kind of in the same vein as our previous water loss and leak adjustment policies being followed. Oh, and it looks like she is online. If anybody wants to ask questions to her, she's got her hand raised. So,
Mr. Hampton.
Was the staff presented any documentation to say that this $41.95 included sales tax?
I believe there was a billing statement, and from what I understand, they were actually they provided a response that they switched to a new system, and it really was doing like a double taxation. But I do believe that she was refunded for that, and we can confirm that with her if we need to. But I do know that they acknowledged that issue, that there was a double taxation, but through a new billing system that they started using, and they've corrected it, is what I've been told.
So was there an actual leak? And if there was not an actual leak, why did they even use their leak adjustment policy?
That's a good question as well, because it doesn't appear that there was one, and that it may have just been a reread or something with the meter.
Mr. Pell.
Do we know anything about the meters? Are they AMR? Were they able to track any kind of consumption history, or are they just manual analog with no data?
I don't have that in front of me. There may be supplemental, but they didn't specify that in their response.
I didn't see anything that they had ever pulled a meter, tested a meter, or tried to pull a meter profile and see when, or lots of times we can pull a digital history and see when a leak stopped or started.
Yeah, when we reached out to them, they didn't provide any trail of what they did to mitigate. It just looked like they went straight to the leak adjustment policy, and Ms. Mendez again didn't want to accept that answer.
Have any questions for Ms. Keeley or Ms. Mendez?
Comments?
Yeah, we'd like to hear from Ms. Mendez and see any comments she likes to have.
Okay, yeah. So Nate, if you want to go ahead. Ms. Mendez, I believe you're unmuted if you would like to address yourself before the board at this time.
Yes. Hello, this is Keely Mendez. And they either didn't check their records or lied on their statement, because I did take the 25% discount. But I didn't have a leak. They told that their go-to for everybody that has excessive water usage is that your toilet's leaking in the middle of the night while everybody's asleep. Your toilet's leaking, and there are people that have $5,000 water bills that's their go-to excuses that the toilet's leaking. But they told us that we had to prove that we repaired a leak, so we replaced the flush valve in the commode, so I could get the 25% discount on the bill. But a few days later, I put the old one back on because I knew it wasn't leaking, and I wanted to prove it wasn't leaking. And our usage is back as normal. It hasn't been 15,000 gallons over since November, and we are keeping a close eye on our meter and taking pictures and documentation, because you have to. I mean, it's poorly run.
Any questions for Ms. Mendez? Thank you, Ms. Mendez.
Thank you.
Unfortunately, the district wouldn't know how to raise their hand. Is anybody from the district online? If you could raise your hand, just checking one more time. Yeah. Mr. Chance Motter, possibly on the call.
Mr. Pelham.
She said she took a leak adjustment, but their response, if I understood, said they didn't give one?
That's what
but then their policy, they
that's
seem
what
to have a
the
policy
response
they
that
were
we have been
consistent
given,
on.
yeah.
Did I understand that correctly?
Yeah. So that's a miscommunication, or, you know, like she said, they've reported it differently than, you know, what happened.
There's several holes here. I still don't understand if they didn't have a leak, why they applied the leak adjustment policy as well. I would personally love to know both those answers before we rule that they followed their process, because I'm not real sure right now that they did.
Okay. So I think what we could say right now is let's go ahead and plan to take no action, but not close this case. Maybe, well, what I'll say too is Minor Hill is going to come back up very quickly here. But for now, let's just plan to go ahead and not close this and allow board staff to get further information on what actually happened and report back to the board at the next meeting.
So if there's no board action, we don't need a motion on that.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
Is that okay with the board? All right. Moving on.
all right. So sticking with Minor Hill, what you'll see here is, you know, of course, anytime that the comptroller's office carries out an investigation, we are responsible for presenting that information to you all. So in the case of Minor Hill Utility District, you know, there's a lot of facts here, but the one things that are a couple of things that I'm wanting to highlight here for you, you know, in their report, they had a bookkeeper, Ashley Stogner. You know, she was ultimately charged with criminal charges, including theft of property, forgery, official misconduct, Computer Crimes Act violation, and destruction and tampering with government records. And she was the bookkeeper at Minor Hill Utility District. The report included one finding that the former bookkeeper misappropriated $1,934 from the district by using funds to pay her open court judgment. Another finding from the report stated that the former bookkeeper signed the names of district commissioners on a total of 61 checks. So those are kind of the highlights there. The utility, when we reached out to them, they weren't able to provide any written policies or resolutions that have been passed to address the failure of internal controls. But they did state that they've got a few new processes as far as like how they write checks. But again, we haven't seen anything that, you know, was officially passed by this board to mitigate these problems. And so with that, as we discussed this a little further among board staff, we originally kind of left it as a discussion, but we have been leaning more towards possibly this would be a good administrative review to probably go in and get a little more information about how that board has been handling this. And, you know, that may also be a really good opportunity to take a look at our customer complaint that we talked to. But, you know, we're open for discussion on that, and I'm happy to answer questions as far as like what the report stated. So
Is it a fair statement to say it appears that the board is not following any of their fiduciary responsibility and there is zero oversight?
yeah, you know, the 61 checks written, you know, with fraudulent signatures certainly jumps off the page.
So they weren't even checking on a monthly basis as to what was going on in the system.
That's what we understand. Yeah. And now what I will say is she has been fired. And, you know, to add a little more context, the actual city of Minor Hill was hit a lot harder. This actual employee took around $103,000 from them. So they kind of, you know, made out a little bit better at the utility district, but still certainly oversight of internal controls.
And I think that's my overarching
Or lack
concern
thereof,
is
excuse
the lack
me.
of oversight and the
Lack
lack
thereof.
of controls. And that you said there has been nothing done to address.
We've been given a brief, you know, we have been told that they've got policies, but as far as like a, you know, that was just an email response. You know, really it's more like hearsay that they do have some new things in place, but we haven't been, you know, given a document that, you know, that they had somebody come in, do an evaluation of process, they passed. You know, we haven't seen anything like that. What you would typically expect when, you know, something like this happens.
Mr. Johnson, did I understand you said that the utility district is a separate entity from the city, but the city was north of 100K?
Yeah, this
For the
same
same-
employee,
same
she was
employee?
working for both of them. Yeah. And similar, you know, similar stuff, writing checks.
And this utility board didn't have oversight of those other
No,
enterprise?
no, they are two separate entities, but the same area. So,
In past cases, we have definitely issued an administrative review, and there have been some pretty harsh and hard actions taken by this
Yeah.
board, so I definitely think that needs to happen.
Mr. Hampton?
Sorry, I may have missed it. How many board members is with this Minor Hill Utility District?
It's a 3-member board.
And what are their terms?
I would assume they follow utility district law, but that'd be something that we can certainly answer.
All right, thank you.
Yeah.
Mr. Perky?
Mr. Chairman, I'm concerned in all the documentation, there is no mention of the district manager other than they have a district manager. So it appears that there's not much oversight at all. No, they only got 2 employees, got a part-time bookkeeper, but where's the district manager in any of this?
And candidly, oversight should be significantly easier with that small a staff, I would think.
Yeah, absolutely.
It says they employ a district manager.
Yeah, that's all it says.
Yeah.
Mr. Hampton?
On the utility district's audits, were they always behind or were they pretty current?
I want to say they've got a 24, so they're,
I mean, yeah,
I think they're a little behind.
wouldn't say
That's
like-
what I want to say, but they do have somewhat relevant, recent. They're not 2 years out or anything.
Their fiscal year end is, so they have a December 31 fiscal year end. And so their last audit, their 23 audit came in late, their 22 audit looks like it came in on time. Let's see, 2023. We don't have their 24 audit from the looks of it.
Okay, so we are out.
So we're 1 year out.
Yeah.
And then we should also have their 25 audit in a few months.
Yeah. If that's timely. So
Is it staff recommendation to place them on administrative review, vet the customer complaint, and then dig into training, managerial oversight, as well as the maybe fiduciary negligence or?
Yeah, I think we could, we can add specific parameters to it, but I think we could kind of say the full managerial technical capacity review of this entity, including, that's also to include the customer complaint.
Mr. Chairman, this is Anthony Pelham. I would make that motion to place them under administrative review and authorize staff to do the appropriate investigative nature to vet their operation.
Stone will second that motion.
All right, we have a motion from Mr. Pelham, a second from Mr. Stone to approve board recommendation of a full administrative review and everything that encompasses, and also include the customer complaint as well. Any further discussion? None being, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries.
All right. So if you jump on down to page 101, we're going to go ahead and get into the East cases here. Starting with Cherokee Hills Utility District. What I'll say is this is your typical decrease in net position, financial distress. Going back, again, 2 years in a row. Negative, they haven't had a rate study completed in the last 5 years. And so what we're going to do is kind of stick to what we like to do or what we like to recommend on cases similar to this. And that would be to go ahead and get a rate study carried out. And we'd ask that a contract be done by August 31st, 26, and the actual study be done by December 31st, 2026. We're kind of trying to move some of these dates into a uniform 4-month cycle. So we for a total of 8 months to get that study back, because we are finding that we're having to push some of those back. And we do actually hope to see that the contract comes in way earlier than August. We can certainly adjust that, but the thinking is we're trying to keep some of these on a 4 month cycle as far as our due dates. So, Mr. Perky,
Yeah, Mr. Perky.
Mr. Chairman, what county is this in?
This is Polk County. And Mr. Perky, to address, we are trying to, if you, at the top
Oh, I
of the
see
order,
now,
yeah,
the county.
we're trying to
I
fit
see.
that in just for you. And hopefully Nate might be getting a map for us at some point. But
I apologize. I
we
did
do
not
want to
see
keep,
that.
I apologize for not pointing out Polk
No,
County.
that's fine. It's here.
Do you have the demographics of this system, how big it is, how many customers or anything?
This is Cherokee Hills Utility District. Yeah, go ahead, Ross.
Cherokee Hills is a very small utility. I don't know if they can pull up exactly what it is, but Bruce, you might remember Cherokee Hills in front of the UMRB a long time ago because they I mean, this was even before I was on before I was staff, but I mean, this is a very, very rural utility. And when this was in front of the UMRB before, and we're going to have this as part of whatever's reported to the board the next time they come up, but there were issues that they didn't really even have meters at the utility. I don't know if you remember that. They had, this was like a validity score. They had like pretty much a negative validity score on their AWWA. So like they didn't have meters. The entire thing was just in shambles. So this utility struggles, and it has a history of struggling. So I would not be surprised if after the rate study, we come back with a request to introduce a feasibility study. I just don't think that's fair at this juncture because they've been kind of off our radar for so long. So we just want to introduce someone, get an outside party to come in, do a rate study, and then see how we need to proceed moving forward.
That was where I was going. Should we go ahead and introduce that as an action, but I will hold off on that.
I'm not opposed. That's just why we didn't recommend it to begin with.
Only just an observation. If you look here at the financial summary that you've given us, you see that their total net positions jumped about 7 times from 23 to 24. So I don't know if they took on debt or had an expansion project or something, but that's going to impact a significant depreciation on their future operations. So they're going, I mean,
yeah,
that's substantial. They
Yeah,
jumped
they
7
took on
times.
assets, and it looks like assets and some debt, like $1 million worth of liabilities in 1 year. And for their revenue, that's $1 million, and your revenue is less than 100,000. I don't know how you're ever gonna pay it back and pay your other operating costs. Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, I would accept staff recommendation.
I, Eugene Hampton, second.
We have a motion from Mr. Pelham and a second from Mr. Hampton to accept staff recommendations as presented for Cherokee Hills Utility District. Further discussion? None being, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Alrighty. On to the town of Burgonsville. If you'll recall, we brought this entity before you guys because they used the modified approach of depreciation. And while we have some questions and reservations about that, it's not technically illegal. You can use this approach. But what really stuck out to us is that they were throwing in their expense line for, I believe it was 2024, that the maintenance that they spent there was only $2,000. After interview with them, we did find that that was a reporting error, that they had actually spent more, upwards to $16,000 total. And so that would actually fall in line with what their estimates, showed. And so we found that that was an error. And also we did review like how they're actually going about this approach. And they have this, this statement that they put out every 3 years where they essentially go through all of their assets. They provide information about where they stand, and it's all in standing with what GASB 34 says that you need to be doing if you are going to use this approach. So, like I said, we are kind of confused as to why they ever started. We really couldn't get a good answer why you started with this approach. They're not doing anything wrong. And so with that insight about that recording error, we feel as though this is one item that we can move past and, no further action. We just recommend going ahead and dropping this referral, or this order, excuse me.
Mr. Stone.
Chairman, go ahead, please.
Go ahead.
I'd move to accept staff recommendation.
I'll second. Stone will second.
All right, we've got a motion from Mr. Perky, a second from Mr. Stone to accept staff recommendation of closing the administrative review of the town of Burgonsville. Further discussion? None being, all in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries.
All right, and if you move along to page 111, we have the city of Tusculum. And so, again, this is another decrease in that position. They're classified as financially distressed. What we can say is that the utility has not performed a rate study for more than 5 years. The utility does currently have a plan to increase rates within the next 6, but with that said, we would like to see that a formal rate study be carried out to hopefully get them out of this financial distress. So our recommendation is to go ahead and ask for that rate study. And again, sticking with those dates, they're on like the 4-month cycle. August 31st, get a contract back to us, hopefully sooner than that. And then December 31st, go ahead and have that completed. And again, with the ability to provide extensions from board staff as needed if there's like a reasonable cause for extension.
This is Alex Smith. I'll make that motion.
Edwin Carter, second.
We have a motion from Mr. Smith, second from Mr. Carter to accept staff recommendation for the city of Tusculum. Any further discussion?
May I make one comment, Mr. Chairman?
Pelham?
Just in there, once again, looking quickly at their financials, it looks like their operating revenues are $2,000 a month. And so to subsidize the expense of a rate study and have competent professionals come in and do that is, I mean, that's a fairly hefty expense to do that. I agree with the premise. I just, with some of the smaller ones that's here from a managerial, is if their expenses are that and their revenue's $2,000 a month, how do you pay for a appropriate rate study?
Well, I mean, what I would say is there are some parties that are offering free of charge services that we have been certainly, I mean, we don't like actually refer any, like push like business around or anything like that. But there are some parties that we are certainly helping produce some studies for us that are free of charge.
They get it through like the development district or other grants or something like that?
Sure.
Yeah.
And the one thing that I'll add is, and I understand that we might need to revoke the motion in the second that just occurred. I'm okay with including a paragraph to allow flexibility that if they can't find either a subsidized or free situation in which they can get this work accomplished, that we kind of come up with another workaround. Because I agree, if we're dealing with financially distressed entities, we shouldn't be furthering the financial distress by asking them to do this. So I'm okay with the paragraph to give us the ability to be flexible with them to try to find a better solution.
I mean, to me, I think it's not only the financials, the managerial, how they get there, but if it's that small,
Yeah.
how do they have the technical and managerial capacity to even, proceed with the rate study and then understand that, hey, other than just saying you got to generate more revenue and raise rates.
But once again, I think they're pretty close to a very large sewer system that's operated by another that might be an option if you get into dire straits for some of this stuff.
All right, we still have a motion. Do we want an amended motion?
May I ask a question about this statement? And I realize it's just a loss of $687. It seems like such a small amount. I'm just curious, is there any way of seeing on this printout how much cash they have in the bank?
We can add that moving forward.
Yeah.
We can add that moving forward.
Okay.
We do record that information. It's just not presented right now, but we can, that can definitely be edited. We'll work on that for the next board meeting.
I feel like sometimes a utility might think we're going to have a tiny bit of a loss, but it's okay because we have a healthy cash balance. And I wonder if that's the case here.
Sure. No, I think generally that's the case. I think in this instance, they just don't have a big margin to play with at all. But we can definitely add that moving forward, so we'll have a better idea.
I guess to me, too, from an operations standpoint, $24,000 a year revenue, if you're treating sewer, whatever that is, that's really tight. If they have a pump station, they have any broken line manhole or anything, we're talking about thousands of dollars for something.
I guess while I agree with everything that's been said, I think the comptroller staff is applying a rule to all and not using their own discretion of whether or not they're big or small. And so with two, even though it's a very small negative number, with 2 years of negative numbers, they are applying the same rule that fits to all. Sometimes it is a hindrance and sometimes it's not. But in this case, they are applying the same rule to everyone.
Any further discussion?
One thing I will mention, they don't have a cash balance currently. They're reporting zero.
Okay.
As of 24. So that could have changed. That's a little bit behind.
Well, I made the motion. Do I revoke this motion? I mean, I still have to move forward. You may vote me down, but I mean, they are applying that. But I will amend my motion to accommodate the recommendations of staff.
Eugene, second.
So we have a,
Ben, I mean, how do they make payroll if they're reporting no cash balance?
So,
Go ahead. Sorry, Ben.
Go ahead, Nate.
so what I,
He's got
based
the
on
audit
what
in
I'm
front of
looking
him.
at in the audit, so Tusculum is a municipality, obviously, and so it looks like they currently are having inter-fund receivables to
Okay.
probably cover payroll. They only have $1,200 as of 2024 due to the general fund, but that would be my guess, is that $1,200 balance is being owed, or that they just aren't paying anybody out of the sewer fund. May also be the case, and the city recorder, since it's such a small system, just handles that without being paid out. But I would have to look into that.
It's like an interfund.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
yeah, thank you. So what exactly is the staff recommendation at this moment?
Okay. I think what we can say is we want to see that a rate study is done. I think we can agree on that recommendation. As far as how they go about contracting for that, we've given ourselves till August 31st to get a contract. Could we add a provision that says board staff will assist Tusculum in finding a subsidized or free rates vendor to complete this rate study, essentially?
Yeah.
Could you do that under your extension provision? That way we don't have to amend that staff recommendation?
Yes.
That be stretched to have that latitude?
Yes. And so we could say that also applies to the provision for an extension up to 2 6-month periods.
All right, so we still have the motion by Mr. Smith and this original second by Mr. Carter that stands. Anybody else? I'll call the question. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
All right. Certainly something to consider with, I think, the size of some of these entities going forward, and we'll try and better address that going forward. But appreciate it. And that's all I got for East.
May I ask another question on this one outside of this action? On some of these, if they are that small and they're already showing the financial distress, is there a way, I think, and Mr. Giles said this, is there a way if there is an adjacent competent utility there to go ahead and say, if they don't respond in an appropriate manner, you go ahead and trigger a
feasibility study?
feasibility study? Which is going to be more expensive.
Yeah.
And who's going to do that? So.
We'll ponder that and try to introduce that in future, because what I could see happening is because I don't want the position of this board to be first time we have financial distress from them, we're just going to throw a feasibility study at them. But I could see why we don't want to delay something, 8 months when we know that that's where it's going to land by month 3 or 4. So what we could do is think about it and come back to a better, let us consider it, and we'll try to remember that for next time, and we can come up with a better solution.
Even if you just had an informal discussion with them about potential solutions.
Sure. And just to kind of
convey that back.
Because I agree. I mean, time is of the essence in a lot of these situations. And, if you're pushing 8 to 12 months before a feasibility study occurs, how much worse can things get?
Mr. Hampton.
So in this using this utility as an example, if they don't have enough money to pay for a rate study, how would they even participate in paying for a feasibility study? And I'm just being, so And that would become then a considerable financial, I hate to call it burden because it depends on the cost, but then it becomes a burden on the larger or the more stable entity to pay for something that they know the other utility has no capacity. Like, it's different. Capacity is one thing. We clearly see they don't even have the capacity
Right.
to do that.
And that's why I would like to offer, we have our friends over at the Water Finance Exchange who are joining us in the back over there. They offer free to subsidize, reviews like that. TAUD, we've worked with forever now. They also offer similar services. So we would just really be leaning on our nonprofit partners to be able to take care of that in instances where subsidies or free services are necessary. And that's why it kind of gives us the flexibility to help gear them that way without saying you're going to contract with TAUD or with WFX, but just try to guide them in that. Because there's no reason that they need to spend a bunch of money on this kind of stuff.
To me, though, to Ms. Vanistel's point, though, if their cash balance is zero and their revenue's already that small, and then you dig that hole for another 8 months to a year, you've only exacerbated that problem.
Yeah.
And made it a bigger issue.
And I think that this is an instance why they have zero cash. And, you see how small their loss was. I think that they just plan to break even all the time. And, when you're budgeting to break even, you have one bill come up and now you're under. And so it is not, utilities shouldn't be budgeting to break even to begin with, in my opinion. Usually utilities have a healthy, we'll call it a profit margin of somewhere between 10 to, I think, 20%. It's 10% is the median for Tennessee. So when you're budgeting at zero, it just takes one little slip up to get under. So I agree, but that's how we'll figure out better language moving forward for these instances of how we can automatically kick into the feasibility study if needed. But with
Mr. Chairman, can I add one comment? Just a note of observation, because I didn't notice it until just now. This is an unusual utility. They're only serving commercial customers, and they lost their largest customer recently. So this could be an instance where they stood up this utility just to get some economic growth, and they're just, like he said, just breaking even.
Yeah, if I recall, I could be wrong. We'll be able to tell you in a few months. I think it was just set up for the college, and there was, and that's why it shouldn't exist to begin with. And I think that's the fun cases that we have are dealing with utilities that shouldn't exist to begin with. But people don't want to hear that some areas aren't meant to be developed based on the geography and geology and all that, so topography. But regardless, board, if we can move on from this and get to the rest of the manager cases, I think that would be appropriate. And so if the board is okay with it, I would like to move to the Ocoee Utility District, which you will find on page
88.
88. Thank you, Greg. All right. So, board, if you recall from our previous meeting, the Ocoee Utility District, which was a bit contentious, a whole lot has happened since we last met. Ocoee Utility District, we have an open customer complaint with them. We've got an open water loss case, an open decrease in net position, and an open administrative review case. And so I would like to report that I've been, I will say, heavily involved with the Ocoee Utility District over the last months. And I traveled to one of their board meetings a few weeks ago. Since we last met, a lot has transpired. The previous manager is no longer there. The assistant manager has since been promoted to the general manager. They've also shifted with the engineering group that they typically use. The previous engineering group is still on for a few projects that were ongoing. They had a rate study performed by Mr. Daniel Peterson, CPA, who does a lot of work for our board, especially in that area. And what he found, because if you recall, they wanted to take on a whole bunch of debt that they couldn't afford. And the cool thing about a monopoly is you can afford anything because you can just raise your rates. However, it's our responsibility to make sure that just because the government can afford it, that the citizens and the customers actually can. Because it is foolhardy for utilities to go into too much debt for a project that may be unnecessary. And so that's what we were dealing with the ECOA Utility District. And we have a whole lot of projects in Tennessee that probably shouldn't get funded because what it's going to do to their customers, at least that's my professional opinion. However, with the ECOA Utility District, their rates were going to go sky high. So we said, hey, don't do that. Why don't you get a rate study done? Because a lot of the stuff that you were factoring in wasn't included in the Jackson Thornton rate study. So they brought in Daniel Peterson. Mr. Peterson performed a rate study and he said, yo, your water rates are fine, but your sewer rates, they're not good. So you need to not raise the water rates. You need to increase your sewer rates. And we really need to figure out what your capital plan actually is. Because what the previous engineering group was suggesting for both their water and wastewater system, it was too much. I mean, a lot of it was found to be kind of unnecessary. So they've since brought in another engineer. They're finishing up some projects. Board staff is very pleased with the direction that they're heading. However, that doesn't answer the question about the open customer complaint case that they have. And so if you recall at our previous, one of our previous meetings, Mr. David May had appeared as the complainant because he owns a piece of property within the district and he was having issues getting wastewater service at his property. And when they started looking into it, there were a whole lot of issues that came about. There was some stuff that was built on his property that wasn't supposed to be built on his property, so the utility owed him some sort of restitution for that, but he still was unable to join because there were issues from the Department of Environment and Conservation about, the capacity of the way that they were treating their wastewater. I mean, there was just a whole lot going on. It's still not completely resolved, I can tell you that. They are actively working towards a resolution to ensure that Mr. May is given the capacity that he was originally told that he would get before. Right now, from the TDEC perspective, there's the utility wants their capacity to be judged in one manner, it's being judged in another, so on and so forth. But the point that I'm trying to get at is we are actively working towards a resolution. However, where the case stands right now, it's not in the T-Board's jurisdiction. Our jurisdiction is if a customer wants service with a utility that has capacity and they're being denied service, or if they're being denied service for some other reason, that's when we get involved. This is an instance in which TDEC is saying you don't have the capacity. You're not allowed to hook this customer on, essentially. So, I mean, the T-Board has no jurisdiction in this area, and it's up to the utility to increase their capacity or for TDEC to say, you know what, you actually do have capacity. So with that, again, this complaint is out of our jurisdiction. If the complainant wants to make the argument that, well, I was told years ago that I was going to be able to hook onto this system, and then years went by and the utility ended up hooking up other people before his property was ready to be hooked onto the sewer system. If you want to dispute that, that's fine. Still not a T-Board case. That's you suing the utility, because if you have a written agreement about getting service and you made all these plans and then they broke the written agreement, that's a contract dispute, and that's not a T-Board case. So my recommendation, board, is we close the customer complaint because it's grown to a point where it's out of our jurisdiction. We leave the water loss case open because they're continuing to work on their water loss and they have a long road ahead of them. We keep the decrease in net position case open so we can continue to monitor their financial health. And we also keep the administrative review case open so we're able to handle things as needed while they're making all of these changes. And the last thing that I'll close with, because I want it to be very known, is in working with the new general manager and the board president, I am very pleased with the decisions that they've made and how they're progressing, but they still do have a long road ahead of them.
So I believe the first thing we need to address is closing the customer complaint.
I make a motion, we take staff recommendation of closing the customer complaint.
I'll second.
All right, we have a motion from Mr. Giles and a second from Mr. Mr. Dye to close the customer complaint. Any further discussion? None being, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. Any action to be taken on just?
There's really not any other action unless the board has any questions regarding ECOE. I know that it was a big deal at the last meeting, but I hope that I just kind of covered all the bases while we're still moving through the case. But otherwise, we can move on to the South Fork Utility District. Y'all remember our friends at the South Fork Utility District, a long road with these folks. I will say that their attorney has reached out with a legitimate request. We ordered them to send us quarterly updates about how they performed in the last quarter. And, board staff, we try to be smart, but sometimes we make some stupid decisions. And honestly, when you ask someone to perform a quarterly analysis and give us, hey, tell us what you did in the last quarter, and it's due the first day of the next quarter, that doesn't give them a huge turnaround to tell us what happened in the last quarter. So their attorney has reached out and asked that we change the date that is in the prior order. So if you see on page 98, it says, where is it at? The reports must be submitted by the first business day of January, April, July, and October, which, that doesn't give them any turnaround time. And so we're requesting that the deadline be moved from the first business day of each quarter to the 15th day of each quarter. And so that gives them 2 weeks to get their quarterly performance, put it into a readable format, and provide that to us. So that is the recommendation at this time.
Mr. Hampton.
So the recommendation is to change it from the first business day, which could, January 1st could have been on a Sunday and the first business day would have been the 2nd, to a calendar day of the 15th.
Yes.
I want to use business day because business day may be the 22nd just because of you're not counting weekends. So I want to make sure that when we say the 15th, I want, we're saying the calendar day of the 15th.
June, March. Why don't?
Because on average, there's about 20 business days in a month.
Yeah.
So I did, when we use
Why don't we do this? Why don't, instead of, because I'm thinking about how often the T-Board meets, and if I'm trying to get us on a schedule that meets March, June, September, and December, 3, 6, 9, 12. Why don't we just ask for the report to be given to us 2, 5, 8, 11? So February, May, August, November. And so that way the quarter closes, they get a month to get us the report, and that gives us a month to review it before we give it to the T-Board. Because the thing is, if I get it in January, y'all ain't gonna see it for a few months. And despite the issues that we've had with South Fork in the past, we shouldn't give them a task that can be delayed and not put a time crunch on them when they could be trying to handle their business. So I would be more apt to say the quarterly reports are due to us by the first business day in February, May, August, and November to report on the prior quarter that just recently closed.
Then give them a month after the quarter to produce it to get it to you.
Correct.
You a month plus before there would be anything in the potential next agenda package.
Exactly.
I can agree with that.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, this is Anthony Pelham. I would make a recommendation to accept staff's modification to that order to have their updates on the 2-5, February, May, August, and November. Is that right? Did I do that right?
I second.
All right, we have a motion from Mr. Pelham, a second from Mr. Hampton to accept staff recommendation on the month to provide additional opportunity for the entities to prepare the report and additional opportunities for staff to review the report before they come before the board. I find that to be very reasonable. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed?
All right. So now, board, let's see, what time we got here? Okay. So here's what I'll say is we're planning to break for lunch at 11:30. There's a chance we might get through this packet before then, but hold your breaths, who knows? If that's the case, we might just, if we're about to run close to 11:30, I'm going to ask the board as we approach if we just want to wrap up and y'all take your lunches to go, or if we should break if I anticipate a lot of stuff left. But with that being said, board, we've handled the manager cases, which is section 6 of the board packet, and next is going to be Middle Tennessee, which you know usually Megan Densett is here to do that. However, she's not present, so I will be presenting that. And so let's go to page 118. Page 118, we're going to start with the town of Byrdstown. Byrdstown is our typical rate study. Byrdstown just had some financial distress. They lost some money. And they have plans to increase their rates by 3 to 5% in the upcoming year. But they haven't had an actual rate study performed in some time. We don't know if the 3 to 5% is going to be adequate or how they arrived at that. So, board, we're asking them to get a rate study done with everything that's included in paragraph 1 of the staff recommendation, and then follow suit of the deadlines that we have used previously. April 30th, send us the contract. 31st, send us the rate study. And we have extension and subpoena language if necessary.
Make a motion to accept staff recommendation.
I'll second.
We have a motion from Mr. Giles and a second from is that Mr. Dye to accept staff recommendation for the town of Byrdstown as presented. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries.
So next, board, we're going to be on page 126 regarding the town of Salina. The town of Salina, which is in Clay County, they have been under the, started with the Water and Wastewater Financing Board, but now the T-Board. They've been under us since 2017. Just issues. And you know, it is a rural community, if you're familiar with the area, and they just can't seem to get out of the hole that they're in. So, board, we're asking them to do another rate study. However, this will include a feasibility study. It's time for them to look at, merging with another utility. So we're asking by April 30th to send us the contract of who's going to perform the tasks as included in the staff recommendation, and to send us that rate study and feasibility study, which, normally is one document, but by October 31st, 2026. If that is amenable to the board, I'm seeking a motion and a second.
Mr. Chairman, go ahead, please.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I just wanted to ask Ross, what makes this case different? Why would you jump to the feasibility study? Can you explain the background?
Yeah, so the reason that we're going with feasibility study here is that they've been under us for 9 years now. And so, you've been under us, you've gone up and down, like, you clearly can't get it to the point where you're running a successful utility. And this isn't a scenario in which I see the utilities in a growing area, and if we just give them a little bit more time, things are going to be fine. I mean, it's distressed. And had they recently just come under us, I probably wouldn't jump to feasibility study, but I mean, this has just been a case that's been on our radar for a long time. That's why.
Thank you.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, I'd move to accept staff recommendation.
Hampton, seconds.
All right, we have a motion from Mr. Perky and a second from Mr. Hampton to accept staff recommendation for the town of Salina as presented. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
All right, board, page 131. If you remember the case for the Gladeville Utility District I don't think it was our last meeting. I think it was the meeting before. However, this was in regards to it was water hardness. The utility we received a complaint because the water was too hard that is being served to a development. That development had a water softener put on their at their property. TDEC came in and said, "Oh, you're treating that water. You need to register as a utility essentially because you're treating the water." And so that stirred up a whole lot of trouble. And so then the TBOR got involved, and we tried to resolve this. We have made attempts to continue to speak to the complainant. My emails have not been returned, and there currently is stuff happening in the legislature that kind of deals with this. But because we have been unable to speak with the complainant, and we would just like to close the case because it looks like this is being handled by outside parties. So there's that.
Yeah, may I ask Ms. Paul, what's TDEC's, is there any updates from TDEC on this matter from the local field office or Nashville's position on this?
So, excuse me, the TDEC staff have been pretty involved with responding to the complainants as well as working with the Gladeville Utility District. We've been in contact with Region 4 EPA about their validation of our interpretation of the rules, that indeed the water softening system at this property is indeed considered treatment. And so our interpretation of been in determining that it meets that definition and requiring monitoring is kind of supported by EPA. There is legislation moving through General Assembly that is also addressing it. And so we've been able to work with the sponsor of that legislation to reach agreement on that, and will enforce and implement that legislation once it's passed.
Can you elaborate on where the legislature got the 180? That's the number he has put in the legislation, and I don't understand the scientific, well, that's probably for a different day or time, but.
Yeah, I'm afraid I would probably want to refer to Eric Weber, our drinking water technical fellow, on that. I'm sorry, I don't have that background.
Mr. Chairman, if nobody else has any comments, I would move to accept staff recommendation to close this or resolve this matter and dismiss it from T-Board.
I second.
Paula Mitchell, I was going to second it as well.
Oh, okay.
All right, we have a motion from Mr. Pelham and a second from Ms. Mitchell to close the matter on Gladeville Utility District. Further discussion, none being, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
All right, board. So even though there's one item left in Middle Tennessee, I'm actually going to pass it over to Nate because he's got a few suggestions when it comes to the city of Watertown, and then he'll power through the rest of West Tennessee. After that, we'll see where we are in terms of what's left for the T-Board meeting and lunch and figure out which direction we're going to head. But otherwise, I'm going to pass it over to Nate.
Appreciate it, Ross. And good morning, board. Glad that I think this is the first time I can still say good morning, and it's my turn. And so I appreciate y'all coming out today. We're actually going to jump to page 159, which is in the West Tennessee cases, for a couple reasons. One, we do have Mayor Burnett from the City of Friendship here in attendance. So I know we are not going very long today, but I don't want to hold them up as long as we have to. So the City of Friendship, obviously, it's been on y'all's radar for a long time. And the city has several issues. One is with the TDEC directives to improve operations. The other is with the TBOR issues that have obviously been occurring since 2018. And finally, if y'all will remember, there is ongoing litigation between Mr. Bill Williams of the Friendship Water Company and the utility. Currently, the utility is still in the appeals process with the lawsuit, and as you can see in that document that I handed out earlier from Mayor Burnett from the Arnold and Wilson law firm, or Willis law firm, I think. Let me grab that. This is the update that y'all requested from the city regarding the lawsuit. And essentially, this just says that they're still in the appeals process. If the appeals affirms the decision entered by Judge Peebles in the Circuit Court of Crockett County, they will elevate it well, they have two potential courses. One is to seek further review by filing an application for permission to appeal with the Tennessee Supreme Court, or they may arrange to resolve the matter by arranging payment of any amounts determined. Obviously, I've had just as much time as you all to review this document. And I understand the first matter that, hey, we're still in the appeals process. The second matter is that they do have two options. One is elevating to the Tennessee Supreme Court, which I understand. The second option they have is where I kind of have an issue in this response. And my issue is that doesn't really answer the question the board wanted to know. The board wanted to know, monetarily speaking, how will this be resolved? And while the city of Friendship has released their 2024 audit, so they're a little bit more caught up, we still don't have the 2025 audit. It really seems like matters have gotten worse. If you go to page 161 and 162, I've included both the sewer fund and the water fund. From a monetary perspective, they are now down to, and I know this isn't on here, but they are down to less than $50,000 in cash as of the 2024 audit. And the water fund, state law would require, if they are found to be required to pay that $5 million or in excess of $5 million judgment, that they would need to pay that solely out of the water fund. They have less than 1% of that $5 million in cash available in the water fund. And so obviously, while they have gotten better when it comes to the reporting, they're now on the 2024 audit, like I mentioned, this kind of does show that the situation is more dire. Unfortunately, as we have discussed in the past, there is an issue when it comes to the pending litigation from the Friendship Water Company, and how do we deal with that if they are to merge? And that is something that board staff is still working on, hopefully addressing in the future. But at this time, we believe that it's in the best interest to go ahead and pursue a feasibility study. And the reason that I jumped to page 159 and skipped Watertown is because we, as board staff, have reviewed the process for the feasibility study. And for you who are on T-Board, you'll know that the feasibility process is somewhat new for our office. And so we're still trying to work out some kinks. And so if you read the language in section 1, you'll see that it now reads more like a rate study where there are some actual requirements in there. We are obviously amenable to any changes that the board would recommend in this because it is for the first time. But it does say, and I'll just read it, the utility shall have a qualified expert as approved by board staff perform a study of the feasibility of a merger between the utility and surrounding utilities that includes the following: a preliminary review and a list of the 5 closest local government utilities that provide the same services and are within 30 miles of the utility's main office. If there are fewer than 5 utilities that meet the requirement, the preliminary review shall include all local government utilities that meet the requirements. A detailed analysis of at least 2 of the utility systems included in paragraph 1A. If there was only one system identified, the study shall have considered what local improvements may be made to the utility in order to correct all operational, financial, and managerial deficiencies. The detailed analysis shall include a breakdown of what capital improvements must be made for the 2 systems to connect, an analysis of whether or not managerial and financial only consolidation is a viable option and the associated cost for each system, a report that includes the current rates of the ailing utility systems and the estimated rates for every option presented and the findings required by paragraphs 1B and 1B2. And so with that, I'll kind of go back for just a second. As of right now, the city has complied, except for the late audit, has complied with all outstanding board requests as of this document right here. Again, I don't think it necessarily suffices everything the board is looking for, so board staff will be more than willing to work with the attorney to try and get a more in-depth description of how they plan, if this judgment is to be upheld, how they will repay it. And so at this time, I would invite the board, if they have any questions for me on this matter or on the feasibility study recommendations, or if the board has any questions for the mayor, I would invite those at this time.
Mr. Pelham.
Nate, just for my refresher, because I'm not familiar with this part of our state, is this the one where the Friendship has the lease agreement for the water guy that has the lake, but it's contaminated or
Correct.
toxic water
Correct.
that can't be
It's
used?
they signed a 100-year agreement, I think back in 1992, maybe. It was sometime around then. And so, yes, they still have roughly 60, 70 years left of that.
And that agreement doesn't have an opt-out or a cancellation termination clause to?
It would, I assume, and Matt, this might be a question for you. I assume all contracts do if both parties want to opt out, but I don't know for a fact.
I haven't reviewed their contract, but I would assume that if both parties wanted to cancel, they could have, but considering the litigation, that obviously didn't happen.
Not familiar with it.
Mr. Hampton.
All right, couple of things. In this, the staff summary, it says that they have a interfund loan with the gas fund. Is that a special revenue fund, or what is the gas fund?
So it's an enterprise fund. It's the natural gas fund. So it's the exact same as water and sewer. And technically under state law, that would be considered an illicit interfund balance that's being operated. So they're operating essentially because they, like I said, they only have a little bit amount of cash left. They're operating at this point on interfund balances.
Okay, and so at what point would according to the attorney's letter, that they would use city tax revenue to pay any outstanding liabilities?
Right. So, and I'm not an expert in this matter, and if y'all have more questions, I may ask Steve Osborne with Local Government Finance to come up here and explain that. But my understanding is,
Well, I know the answer is no. I just
Right, well-
I just thought that this was a strange statement. So
right. So if a utility system were not to be able to pay judgment, there is what is called a special assessed district. I think it's what it's called, or a special tax district. And basically it says, hey, if there's a lawsuit against you and you can't pay, the property tax would be raised to whatever is needed to be raised to pay this judgment. And with a city of probably 300 homes, you can, I think, I did the math, I think it comes out to a $5,000, $10,000 property tax bill. I don't know exactly, but it is a rather steep repayment. So.
that's a wild. All right. Well, thank you.
Yeah.
Any further questions, comments?
I make a motion, we accept staff recommendations on moving forward with the feasibility study.
I'll second.
It'd be up to the board whether or not.
What's the board's will? Further comments?
I guess just a comment, I guess it'll be determined in the feasibility study, but if the study deems it feasible, does the neighboring utility assume the responsibility of this litigation?
So that's what board staff is currently working on, or part of what we're working on. It would be my hope that the answer to that would be no. The issue, regardless, would be that the litigation's not going away, whether it stays with the City of Friendship or if it moves to a new utility system. Obviously, if there's no way and it moves to the new utility system, that's not something that I don't think, I'll speak for all of us, that we're looking to do to any neighboring utility system, is give them a $5 million lawsuit.
Mr. Hampton.
But based on our previous discussion about the taxing, coming up with a special taxing district, I would think that they would just use that taxing district to pay the bill. And so it wouldn't be a burden to the additional, the new utility district as per se, so.
That would be a legal question. I don't know if Matt has the
I'm just,
answer
like,
to that.
based on what you said, I
Whether,
would think that would be
whether
the
it
answer.
moves to the new utility or not, I'm not
Yeah.
sure.
All right, thank you.
Mr. Pella.
May I ask one question to the mayor? Is the town paying this contract as it is now and paying this guy the terms of that and then getting water from another source?
No, sir.
So you're rolling up accruing liabilities now?
Mr. Burnett, would you come up to the podium so the microphone can hear you?
Sorry about that.
No
No, sir. We're producing our own water.
When you say producing your own water, you're withdrawing from another well or another
Yes, sir.
groundwater source?
Yes, sir. No, sir. Well, we were getting water from them from wells, and they come up with a contaminant, tetrachloroethylene, hit it. And anyway, we got ordered by TDEC, to stop purchasing water from them. So we dug 2 new wells right quick, right at our water plant. We were only purchasing raw water from them. We were treating it, the city was, we got our own treatment plant. And so that's went okay, and we hadn't been hit by the contaminant in the wells we dug, okay? We're only 2 blocks away, but.
But my question was just very basic.
Yes,
You have
yes.
a contract to buy water from them, but you're not paying that. You're getting water from another well source currently.
Belongs to
And
the
so
city. Yes, sir.
Gotcha.
Well,
Thank
we're
you.
not.
That was.
But one thing I want to add to that, one of the reasons that we're in financial problems is this litigation's eating us up, and attorney fees and all, sure. But also, before we do we've got a rate study already started by TAUD, is doing that for us. But the only neighboring, and look, I'm not against joining other utility districts. 10 years ago or so, we hooked up to city of Dyersburg sewer system. They treat our sewer now. But, and we closed our sewer plant. But the only water district that could take us on would be countywide utility district. They'd still, all they could do is just operate our system because their plant's not big enough to take us on, and they don't have mains that reach to us large enough to supply us. But they have been threatened by lawsuits from the water company also if they sell us any water. And I wish we could get, once we get this this lawsuit over with one way or the other, that I think would be the time to talk to them about merging in with them. I think we'd get a lot better results.
All right, thank you for your comments.
Okay.
Ms. Vanisdale.
Mr. Chairman, what I'm interested in is looking toward the future and trying our best to protect these ratepayers and this water system. And a feasibility study does not say that anyone has to take them over. I'm just very concerned that someone may need to take them over, and starting this process a year or two or whenever this lawsuit gets settled might be a little bit late.
All right, any further comments? We still have a motion from Mr. Giles. Who is the second on that?
The one thing that I do want to say in response to the mayor's comments is, I totally understand trying to wait till this matters to settled in the courts. It should have already been. This has been going on for way too long. I think I could speak for everyone. I am genuinely concerned about the citizens and the ratepayers. We deal with financial distress. We deal with issues. I have concern for them. But, this is really serious. And this should have been settled a long time ago based on how much money has been spent on these attorneys for a very simple contract dispute. It's crazy that this is still ongoing, and the actual citizens are at risk. Friendship could be the worst financial and health situation that we have going on in Tennessee right now. And just saying, well, maybe we should wait until this contract dispute is settled. Based on the performance, that could be years away. And there could be $0 in the utility fund for whenever that contaminant does hit the wells. And what happens then? I understand that countywide utility district or whatever utility, that lawsuits have been threatened and such, and we want to navigate those waters as things come up. But we can't just sit back and hope that everything's going to be fine whenever their attorneys figure out how to make this thing go away based on how much money that's been spent. So I don't think that we can, and that's why I appreciate the motion that is on the table right now, because we can't wait any longer. This case has been open since I started with the Water and Wastewater Financing Board, and it was open prior to that. We can't wait any longer and just wait until the courts figure it out. The only people at risk right now are the citizens and the customers.
I had seconded.
All right. Any further discussion?
Mr. Chairman, I'll just note that staff has the authority to grant 2 extensions up to 6 months. So, I mean, Ross is right, of course. The city's in a pickle. And I have no answers on how they're going to get out of it. They've got all these interfund transfers and a court ruling that is just unattainable for them. So I'd be in favor of the motion, obviously.
All right, we have a motion by Mr. Giles, a second by Ms. Vanisdale to accept staff recommendations as presented on the Town of Friendship. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you, Board. And with that, we are actually going to move back to page 133. And the reason for that is because the City of Watertown, like the City of Friendship, has been a long, ongoing case under Tibor. I actually think it's an older case than Friendship. And it's basically just a financial distress case that we've been dealing with for a long time. It's in Middle Tennessee, so I'm not as familiar with the details. So if y'all have any questions, I may ask Ross to come up here. But the reason that I'm presenting this recommendation is because there was an oversight by board staff, myself specifically, and the feasibility study should have been the copy and paste language that you see in the Friendship order, which is those new requirements that we're asking out of a feasibility study, just to make sure we're getting actual specifics from the feasibility studies that get submitted to our office. So with that, I open the floor to any questions if y'all have that, but we are asking for an amended recommendation just to use the language from the Friendship order when it comes to the feasibility study requirements.
Any questions, comments?
Mr. Chairman, this is Anthony Pelham. I would move to accept the amended staff recommendation and include that standardized verbiage and approve the staff recommendation.
Stone will second.
All right, we have a motion from Mr. Pelham, a second from Mr. Stone to accept staff recommendations of amended language for the City of Watertown. Further discussion? None being, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you, Board. And with that, we'll go back to the West Tennessee. And on the first page of that packet, 157, is the Town of Centerville, which is a customer complaint. About 2 years ago, a customer came to us and alleged that the utility was charging a variable rate for sewer when they did not have sewer connection, but did have the option for sewer. And so after a year or so, and Tibor discussing this, Tibor came to the decision that this was not following with Tennessee statute or allowed. I think there was an attorney general's opinion in there somewhere. And so we asked them to do a rate study, but then also to cease the practice. Since then, the utility has ceased charging customers. They reported to me, I think it was about 13 customers who were being charged variable rate but weren't on the sewer. So they've ceased that charge to those customers, completed the rate study, implemented the necessary changes. The citizen no longer lives in the town of Centerville. I don't think they live in the state of Tennessee. She left without paying her final bill, and I haven't heard anything from her. And so at this time, we're recommending to close the case. If that customer ever does come back and request some type of refund, we can definitely reopen it at that time. But right now, I just don't see any reason to keep this one open.
I'll make that motion. Smith?
Paula Mitchell, second it.
All right, we have a motion from Mr. Smith, second from Ms. Mitchell to accept staff recommendation to close the customer complaint, Town of Centerville. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Appreciate it. And moving on, we'll skip Friendship since we've already discussed it. To
May I
page.
make one comment there, Mr. Chairman? I'm sorry.
Sure.
I will just report to the board, since I was one of the people who took challenge to the AG opinion there. I can report to you the Spencer system, we took over, there were 24 customers that met that same precedent, and we have corrected that to match, though I still would challenge the AG opinion.
Noted. And so with that, we'll be on page 169. Honestly, this one should have probably just been in one of the consent orders. It's just a release, or excuse me, I think it is an update cycle for the city of Lexington. This one's just a little bit different of a financial distress case since it had to do with negative unrestricted deposition, but they've completed a rate study. They're working on it. And so we feel at this time that it's appropriate to move them up into the update cycle.
Make a motion that we accept the staff recommendations.
I'll second.
All right, we have a motion and from Mr. Giles, a second from Ms. Vanisdale to accept staff recommendation on City of Lexington as presented. Further discussion, none being, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries.
Appreciate it. So moving right along to the town of Mason. The town of Mason, again, is another long-standing city utility that we've been experiencing issues with. And so I'm going to not read everything, but I'm going to briefly run through everything. At the last meeting, the Tennessee Board of Utility Regulation ordered that a feasibility study be completed by the town. At this time, that has been completed by CEC Engineering. Additionally, the utility is working with Buddy Petty with ratestudies.com to complete a rate study. And so right now the rate study is just about to be wrapped up. But I do want to discuss two items in here. One is that the utility has lost approximately 22% of their net position over the last 3 years, with 2024 resulting in a loss equal to over half its revenue. I've seen the estimated for 2025. Obviously, this is just estimated, but based on it coming from Buddy Petty, I assume it's fairly accurate for what 2025 will look like. And they will now have lost over 33% of its net position in just a few short years. So that's the first thing I wanted to highlight. The second one is that board staff, along with other members of the Comptroller's Office, attended a meeting on February 17th and met with the governing body at a public meeting. During the meeting, the board demonstrated severe managerial ineffectiveness and a complete lack of proper procedure. These issues were expressly evident during two portions of the meeting. First, the governing body failed to adopt an updated purchasing policy. A third-party consultant is currently working with the utility to help update the necessary policies and procedures. The governing body was not able to understand the proper procedure for adopting the resolution. And then secondly, the utility failed to properly address a customer complaint that was presented and of urgent matter. During the public meeting, a resident of Mason addressed the board and explained that the apartment complex she managed was currently experiencing raw sewage backflowing into tenants' dwellings. According to the customer, this had been ongoing issue for around 3 years. The mayor added that this was actually ongoing for about 10 years. Once the complaint was made to the governing body, the board members took no action other than agreeing to discuss the matter further. And I will say at this time, the issue has been resolved, but in its resolution, it highlights other issues with the utility system. So kind of a short story here. The customer was correct. Her apartment complex that she managed did have raw sewage backing up into it. The apartment complex is directly connected to a lift station, and the lift station has a pump that is broken. The town of Mason cannot afford to fix the lift station pump because they do not have the cash for it, so it would require issuing debt or accepting some type of grant. They do have a workaround, and it's an above ground pump. My understanding is that it's a temporary solution, but it's capable of pumping out the raw sewage and basically bypassing the lift station pump. However, when TDEC sent a team out to investigate, they found that there weren't really any issues, just someone had turned the pump off. And so the pump is back up, it's running, but I just say this to highlight the fact that it wasn't a broken line, it wasn't a broken pump necessarily, it was just the fact that the town is ineffective when it comes to proper utility management. And we've known that for quite a while now. Like I said, board staff followed up with TDEC, and it was just the bypass pump that was shut off. And so it's my understanding that it's been resolved. And we're getting to that last paragraph. I was at a meeting on March 10th, so 2 days ago. And so I haven't had time to reconnect with the customer. So the board order will stand, or my recommendation will stand, which is making sure that this complaint gets resolved. And I just haven't had time to follow up with the customer, so it may be resolved at this point, but I do want to verify that. With that being said, I did travel to the utility and attended a workshop discussing a rate study that is being finalized. You can see there in the second section is just a preliminary analysis that was presented to the board at that session. And so they discussed the cash flows that are necessary to fund the capital projects. The utility will need to raise water and sewer rates by 5% and 120% respectively as of July 1st this year. And every year after that for the next, I think, 4 years, they'll need to do increments of 5% for both. While board staff does believe that the rate study is accurate and will provide a viable plan for the future, I still have large concerns about the utility's capability in handling the deployment of the capital improvement plan and also just their general management that they have. And so also we have a concern about handling the increase in debt that will be required for funding. During the meeting, staff also discussed the opportunity to consolidate with the Poplar Grove Utility District and how this would alleviate some of the issues currently requiring a large portion of the utility's attention. The board seemed amenable to this idea and planned to discuss this option at the next meeting. At this time, board staff recommends waiting to discuss potential consolidation till a future meeting. And so to wrap everything up, like I said, the customer portion is still going to stand. It's what we recommend that the board order for the utility. As far as the consolidation goes, like I said, we just got the feasibility study recently, and we would like to review it more with the city. And I also think that there may be some opportunity for the city to consolidate on their own. And when that does take place, that's usually an easier process than board staff having to go down there, have a public hearing, you all having to come back and vote on it. And so for right now, we're just pushing that off until the next meeting because we'd like a little bit more time to discuss internally. But then also I would like to give them a chance to discuss this on their own. And it's something that they promised to discuss at the next two board meetings. They are going to go ahead and complete the 5% and 120% rate increases on their water and sewer customers because really at this point it's more of a crisis rather than planning for the future. So the rate increases need to take place regardless, but at this time I'm recommending that we just hold off on that until we have a little bit more time to discuss between board staff and the municipality.
Mr. Chair, question, is there any enforcement action being taken by TDEC that you're aware of? Or, I mean, this is known, I know in past years, there have been criminal cases for things like this. I can think of one immediately in Upper East Tennessee where they knowingly bypassed the system and left it off. Is there any action at all being taken?
I think there is, I'm sorry, Paula Mitchell here. There is current enforcement action. I think that is open.
Just curious if the AG will look at this in a different light as it was done in the past.
Nate, if I may ask another question, if I'm recalling, did they not contract the service with a third party, or was that started and then stopped since then? I was thinking, was it Alliance?
For the utility management, yes. Correct. So they did contract, and it's been, man, all the years run together. Yeah. I think it was 23 is when they started the contract, and then they ended the contract September of 24. Does that sound right?
I think it was 24, 25.
Okay, 24, 25. And so they no longer are contracted with Alliance. But really, there's so many things that have convoluted this situation because I think Alliance was $360,000 increase in expenses in just 1 year, right? And so it's hard to have a rate study, feasibility study, when you have a 30% increase in your yearly expenses. And so since then, we've had a couple rate studies completed, now I think a couple feasibility studies completed. And so we would like to close this case at some point. But I think at this point in time, I'm okay waiting to see if they come back with a decision on their own.
Further comments? Entertain a motion.
Eugene, make a motion to accept the staff's recommendation.
Smith, I'll second.
All right, we have a motion from Mr. Hampton, a second from Mr. Smith to accept staff recommendation on Mason. Further discussion? None being, all those in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Appreciate it, board. And so moving on to the last entity for West Tennessee is the city of Ridgely, which is honestly just, I think, the only kind of normal case we have for West Tennessee today. And it's just a decrease in net position case. They're up in Lake County. It's the standard. They haven't performed a rate study in more than 5 years. They have not increased their fees in the last 5 years. They don't have a plan. They don't have a debt management policy. And so board staff is recommending that the board shall order just your standard rate study requirements for the utility for them to complete.
Mr. Chairman, I'll make that motion. Ms. Vanisdale.
I'll second Giles.
All right, we have a motion from Ms. Vanisdale, a second from Mr. Giles to accept staff recommendations on this, as presented on the City of Ridgely. No further discussion pending. All those in favor? Aye. Motion carries.
Awesome. And so one last item, and then I'll turn it back over to Ross. I think we've discussed at prior meetings, this is page 194, at prior meetings, we need to update the annual information report. And so you can see there, I've shown what items are being removed. We're going to remove where they need to report their net sales and the operating expenses, including depreciation for the last fiscal year, because we already received this in an audited format. The second item we can remove is whether they've submitted their budget, whether they've submitted their audit. Again, this is something we already receive and know about once they do submit it. The items that is being replaced is currently we just ask a yes or no question on whether they have complied with training. Obviously, there are situations where either the individual who is reporting this is just unaware, or other instances where maybe there's willful negligence in how they respond. And I just don't believe, board staff doesn't believe that this is a great way to monitor training validity and training compliance, which this board is required to do by state law. And so what we're doing is on that second page, page 195, we're just going to be asking for the board member's name, their initial election date, and how many hours are completed in the most recent training period. And this will be, it looks a little bit more complicated, but it honestly isn't. It's just going to be where they fill out those items for the first time, and when they want to submit the AIR the second year, assuming all those board members are the same, they'll just have to update the third column, right? Or they may not even have to update the third column because the training cycles are in 3-year periods. And so we're just asking that this be included now. Also, they'll have to answer yes or no to whether the annual written statements were filed. There's no action on that, but it's more to serve as a reminder for the local governments to do that. And so at this time, I stand for any questions.
If I may ask,
Mr. Pelham.
Nate, if I may ask one question, this is just a question that I had received from another utility. The way that some of the cases come out for board member training, then it comes back, and so in especially small towns, the comptroller notification, whoever the AIR contact is, may go to a mayor or a city recorder and may not make it to utility manager. And so, and candidly, the question that was raised to me was, the reputation appears to be impugned of a utility that's not a management, it's not a financial matter, but you have one sitting council member or you have one board member who either clicks through the training or misrepresents the training, and then they come up, and then it just shows up that, I had one board member, but Warren County Utility District's name is the one that's used. Is there any consideration of saying, okay, this is who the violator is? I know that potentially has some political bear trap issues, and, people say, okay, here they are, they've misrepresented and done that. I don't know, but is there any consideration if it's a second time offense or somebody like that, they say, okay, here's what that violation is, Mr. Stone did not complete his training at Warren County Utility District, something of that nature.
Right. And so as far as including with, well, I'll say this. So I'm open to any changes y'all want to make when it comes to that. When it comes to training orders, as you can see, when Ben presented, most of them are consent. And so, we could, as board staff, discuss whether we want to say Warren County Utility District and then a bullet point under that says Mr. Steve Stone, right? We could do it that way. As far as leaving the entity name out altogether, I don't think we can do that because we can't take action against individuals. We take action against utilities. And so I understand the concern, and it's something we can talk about internally and definitely try to make it more into this is an individual issue, not a general management issue that might benefit.
The gentleman that approached me, he was concerned about the reputation impact to management when he had one or two board members who were just obstinate at following through with the state requirements.
Mr. Hampton and then Ms. Vanisdale.
All right, looking at your recommendation on the wording on page 195, is there anything prior to this that would define most recent training period so that someone doesn't wiggle around and say they didn't understand?
So we can make that more clear. We'll probably add the words, maybe hours completed and most recently completed training period. Just something to make it more defined, because what we're asking is if, let's say, I'm currently in my second continuing education period, and my first continuing education period ended December 31st, 2025. I want to know what hours were completed during that period, right? And so we can make it a little bit more clear. So like you said, we definitely, the goal here is to make sure that individuals are reporting accurately. And so I'm more than open to making that change. I don't know if necessarily we have to, this would be a question for Matt. I don't know if we have to necessarily get an exact copy of what y'all want approved, but I was wanting to provide a general outline of what it's going to look like.
From an operational standpoint, by January 31st of every year, board members have to file their annual training declaration. So it could be that most recent one that should be on file, which then also sets them up for their compensation, right? I mean, I know it's.
Ms. Vanisdale.
Well, I'm not a utility district, I'm a municipal utility board, so my rule may be slightly different, but it's kind of a complex question when you're answering this, and it's not as easy as what this chart looks like, so I would ask you to maybe make it a little bit more simple for the folks that are filling it out. And the reason I say that is my understanding of the rule we fall under. My board member gets appointed by the city council to the utility board in August, and they have 12 months from the appointment date to get their initial training period. And then starting on January 1st thereafter, the 3-year cycle starts. If you ask it most recent training period, that might mean something different depending on which board member you're talking about. There's some that'll be in that initial training 12 months, which is from calendar date of appointment, and then some that are in that January 1st to 3-year cycle. So,
Right.
I have a recommendation.
Sure, I have one, but
Okay. Well, we have competing ideas, and we'll see which one y'all like better. Here's my suggestion, and kind of makes it more complicated, but it also sometimes you need to ask more questions to make it more simple. So it's going to be a table, board member name, date of initial appointment or election, date of when you fulfilled that initial training period. Because like you said, if you're appointed in August, you have until next August. But if you complete it in September, your training period starts that January. But if you complete it next year, then your training period starts the next January. So we need that date of initial appointment or election. We need when you completed the first one, and that will be recorded year to year. So the utility filling this out will just have to get it right the first time, or when you add new members. And then from there, it's going to, we can do math, and it will say like, okay, your last period is like from this date to this date, how many hours were done during that period. And so it's kind of, through the annual information report, we'd almost be establishing a very tiny database for the utility to keep track of how many. It's kind of crazy we should have to do this to begin with, because utilities should be doing it on their own, but we all know that they ain't. So, but it's through the AIR, you know.
Yeah, we all.
Okay, but it was the collective they. There's 450.
I know so much about it.
There's 450, y'all. No, so that way every time they go into the AIR, it's going to show, okay, you know, so-and-so was appointed here, they got it here, they did the hours. Oh, they were supposed to get 6 last year. They didn't. And so that way it kind of flags it on their own and then it flags it for us. So that would be my recommendation. Nate?
that was essentially, that was my recommendation as well, would be to have, in this case, Ross has recommended having 5 columns, but my recommendation is having a 4th column that is going to be a non-fillable column, and we'll use logic already in the system that says, like what Ross said, which is the initial election date and the date that they completed that, and that will set up, as long as, in perpetuity, as long as they are a board member, that will set up a logic that we can use, or that our technical services team can use in order to determine, hey, what was your most recently completed period? So it will say, the 4th column will say from January 1st, 2025 through December 31st, 2027, how many hours were completed. And so that would be, and I can restate it if we need to, but that would be,
I think that's enough for us to be able to get a vote on, and then us hammer it out when we put it together.
Can I suggest an easier suggestion? If you forget the logic thing and trust us to keep up with it, it would be helpful to just enter the board member's name and number of hours they got that year, and just have some sort of a record. If it's ever questioned, I've submitted, they've got these hours each year.
So the issue that we run into, and I generally deal with the training, and so it's wild, that training, because it's really should be one of the simplest things we deal with, but it's one of the most complicated things we deal with, because I reach out to a recorder and she says, well, Mr. Smith or whoever, I don't even remember when he was elected. He's been here forever. And then I say, well, when did he get his training? And she's like, well, 2014. And it's like, well, municipal systems weren't required to get training until 2017. And so after 2017, when did he get, right? And so it's this whole thing. And so I get what you're trying to do. We're like, let's make it as simple as possible. Unfortunately, in that situation, we would have to keep track, and we say, hey, someone's reported 0 3 years in a row. That's kind of a concern. But then we'd have to reach out and ask for that initial date. And if it's an initial date in the past, we'd have to see if they ever completed the initial training period. Because it could be 3 years of zeros is a concern, but it also could be just a split, right? Where you have 2 years, they got 12, then 0, 0, 0, 12. And they would still be in compliance or 6, I guess now, but if they did that. So I would keep our recommendation, but I do understand like wanting to make it more simple when we can.
And the one thing that I'll add is, we saw in the consent calendar how many utilities we're releasing, right? So like you can see, it's not that a lot of people don't comply with the training requirements, and a lot of people don't comply with the annual information report requirements. So there is a bit of an effort to try to get people under control, because it's not like we're just dealing with 1 or 2 utilities. However, with the concerns that y'all have, because government forms that are overly complicated, no one likes them. And so I don't want to overly complicate something like this. So I stand with our recommendation of improving the table. However, if the board wants us to come up with show y'all what it's going to look like on the website before it's voted in, we can come up with that. Because it might be easier for y'all to see it in practice. So we adopt all of the other changes and then move forward with the table. That's something that I'm also amenable towards.
So just to make sure I understand, this questionnaire, this annual information report, when you ask that question, that's going to be used for enforcing board member training, for you to find out when they're not doing it?
Correct.
Okay. Then I'm fine with that.
Further discussion? What is exactly the recommendation, please, sir? One more time.
So the recommendation would be everything on page 194 is staying the same. And then on page 195, that second part of 195 regarding the training statements is going to stay the same. But the actual table regarding the board member information, the first column will ask for the board member's name. The second column will ask for the date of their initial election or appointment. The third column will ask for a date that they completed that initial period of 12 months. The fourth column will be a calculated field that will just tell the individual filling out the form what their most recent period of each member was. And then the final column, the fifth column, will ask for the hours completed during that period.
Yeah, so it'll say between January 1st, 25 to December 31, 27, how many hours have been done. And then you just say, okay, I'm just keeping a tally. I know it kind of sounds difficult, abstract, but when you see it, it's gonna make sense.
Mr. Perky.
Mr. Chairman, Ross, is it fair to say that if someone is behind on their audits, submitting them, that they're probably behind on this too?
So surprisingly, no, because it's a lot easier for us to tell a city recorder, hey, go fill this form out, than it is to tell a city, go get your auditor to fill this audit out for you. So it's easier for us to force compliance on the AIR than it is to force compliance in the audit world.
Okay, thank you.
Do we have a motion?
I'll make a motion, we accept staff recommendation, the modified recommendation.
I'll second.
All right, we have a motion by Mr. Giles and a second by Ms. Vanisdale to accept staff recommendation on the changes to the annual information report. Further discussion? None being, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Thanks so much.
All right, board. So we are at the end. We have 2 more items to discuss. However, it is 11:45. The 2 items that are left for discussion are the request to review the water line useful lives, which could be a bit of a discussion, could not be, who knows? And then the other one is the future T-Board meeting dates, which we all know that's just a couple minutes for everyone to check their calendar for those that already haven't. So I will leave it up to y'all. Do y'all want to power through? I bet we could not, I'm not even going to guess how long it's going to take because I'm always wrong. So it's up to y'all. Do y'all want to just knock these 2 things out and then we can get on the road? Yes.
I think the will is to keep going.
All right. So then, board, we're going to move to the request for review of waterline useful lives, which you will find on page 196. The Mallory Valley Utility District has requested that the Tennessee Board of Utility Regulation look at the useful lives for utility assets. Back in 2016 is the last time that this issue was visited by the Water and Wastewater Financing Board of the Utility Management Review Board. It is up to this board to kind of adopt the standards by how long things are depreciated. So the Mallory Valley Utility District has supplied some information saying that they believe that water lines, the water lines that they mention, their useful life should be extended up to 75 years. And so if the board elects to consider the request, the relevant considerations may include whether depreciation guidelines should reflect conservative accounting estimates or projected engineering life, whether any revision should apply exclusively to ductile iron pipe or to water lines generally, the potential financial reporting, rate setting, and intergenerational equity implications of extending depreciation periods, and whether additional input from engineers, auditors, utilities, or other stakeholders is warranted before any change. Because this is a big deal. This really is a big deal. And so I'm happy for us to have the discussion today and for y'all to come up with it. Or you can say, Ross, I want you to go talk to every engineer from here to Mississippi and talk to the auditors, talk to local government audit, and get everyone's input. But I wanted to bring this in front of the T-Board for y'all's input before we proceed.
Mr. Chair,
Mr. Giles.
I personally believe we need some time to look at this and primarily with ductile in the water systems, because even in my system, I've got ductile that is 35 years old in a corrosive environment that's failing, and then I got ductile that's 70-something years old in just a standard environment that's just fine. I understand the argument. I tend to agree with it, but I think there's more needs to be done other than just passing this wholesale without talking to some experts in this area.
And
primarily for ductile and water, ductile and wastewater, I'll make the argument that 50 is more than enough when the time comes.
Sure.
So,
Yeah. No. My and that's my concern here is, if we find instances where it is going to last more than 50 years, sure. But what about the instances where it's going to come in way under 50, and just trying to make sure that we're not doing something short-sighted. So with that, I will let y'all decide what we need to do moving forward. And so if there is a specific thing that y'all want us to do in terms of solving this question, let's put it in an order so we know exactly what we need to present to y'all. And then I get to go back to college and do another research paper, and I haven't done one of those in a long time.
Mr. Stone.
Well, does TDEC have opinion on this as far as what comes out of the inside of a pipe after so many years? I mean, there's so many different questions that are running into my head. I'm certainly not an expert on making that decision.
Well, I think what I can say, this is Paula Mitchell, by the way, our engineering services staff and our technical staff within our state revolving fund program would likely be very interested in engaging with the board staff on this topic of discussion. So I'm inclined to support kind of further research and discussion with subject matter experts on it.
I'll say that the last people that I plan on talking to, I'm going to talk to them, but just know that I ain't going to weigh the opinion too much, is the folks that make the stuff, because they're going to tell you that this stuff is going to last forever. We're going to be really interested in the opinions of people who aren't biased. And luckily that's TDEC. Fortunately, that's for us. But I want y'all to know that, if you tell me to go talk to some manufacturers, I'm more than happy to, but I'm going to heavily discount what they have to say. Because anything to push a product,
Mr. Hampton.
Yes, I would love for you to talk to TDEC, but is there a way a very simple way, I know it's probably, to understand the way to just poll how many of the utility districts are using it in water versus using it in sewer? So we'll see if we change this policy, what would be the impact across the board? Because if we extend it to 75 like the suggested, that was going to affect depreciation, which would definitely affect the number of utilities it would basically help quite a few.
Yeah.
And it may even remove them from our review because depreciation just went down enough that they could ask for relief from our board purview.
So I have two responses there. Is one, we are more than happy to survey all the utilities and get that information because I don't have it right now. But two, the other thing that we'll discuss with our Division of Local Government Audit is if this is amended, can utilities go back and restate, or is it is it just prospective instead of anything retroactive? If you have stuff on the books, can you edit that to 75 now? And that that's going to require some nuanced conversation. But I'm more than happy to look into that as well.
Ms. Vanisdale.
I think Mr. Hampton has a good point. I have a suggestion. A lot of us received the ARPA grant funding, and a condition of that was to make sure you have an asset management program in place. And I'm just going to speak for Harriman, but I think this might be true for a lot of folks. We're using a TDEC standardized database or spreadsheet format, and I think it might have a lot of that information that you're asking about. So it may not be a tremendous effort to collect that
Sure.
at the end of this ARP 2026 deadline.
Yeah.
I can say this rule change would help my utility a lot. It would help a lot of us that are doing projects right now that are more expensive than they've ever been, but seemingly too expensive these days. So I like the idea of researching it further, but I hate to agree with Mr. Giles, but he's right. I just had a ductile iron pipe in a corrosive environment that was never planned to be corrosive, but things happen and environmental conditions change and spills happen or whatever. So it's certainly true that there will be cases where you get bad pipe or you get a situation where the pipe fails prematurely. But generally speaking, I feel good about 75 years.
Well, and the one thing that I'll add to that too is, if right now the standard is 50 years, who's to say that pipe doesn't fail at 20? Just because we extend it to 75 doesn't say that, everything is guaranteed to last to 75. Instead, what you're doing is you're just recognizing the cost of that asset over a longer period of time. But clearly that's going to be no guarantee. So I will say right now, I don't have a preference either way. Like this ain't my wheelhouse. This really is a y'all thing, but I'm more than happy for us to educate ourselves and learn more about how this works out, because I'll go ahead and tell you, board, if we decide to do this, we're going to be asked to review every asset's useful life and extend it all, because we know depreciation is Tennessee's boogeyman. And people like to point at it even though they've got a whole host of other issues they need to be dealing with. So if we do this, we're just going to have to get used to it. But and I'm not saying that as a point of caution. I'm just saying it's going to be a can of worms.
I'm sorry, Mr. Jones.
Well, is this the same ductile iron that is used in gas lines? Is it the same steel? Because I know the life of that can depend if you put a charge on it too to keep the. Yeah. So it's just It gets complicated really fast.
There's a lot of variables with this, and that's why I lean toward the 75. I'm good with as well, but that's why I want differentiation between water and sewer as well,
Yeah.
because those are completely different environments. And I personally, when I went back and looked at all these depreciation schedules, they all look pretty solid to me. That's the one where I think you can make the argument that ductile lasts longer.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mr. Perky.
Mr. Chairman, I'd obviously defer to my colleagues who are experts in the area, but why don't we just very simply take advantage of Paula's offer for her staff to work with the staff and come up with parameters that we can look at.
Is that a motion?
I would make that motion.
That works for me.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
All right, we have a motion from Mr. Perky, a second from Mr. Hampton to accept staff recommendation to work with TDEC on gathering further information on this issue. Any further questions, comments? None being, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
All right, board. Page 205. Final page of the packet. Future meeting dates. I know that Ms. Vanisdale reached out with some conflicts that she had. And so basically, I never really know the best way to try to figure these dates out for everyone. It's really hard to coordinate 11 people's schedules. So let's just start with June 11th, 2026. Maybe this is the best way to do it. Who in here can do June 11th? Everyone? Who can't? Okay, we got one. Is there, let's say that we were to go to June 18th. Could you do that, Ms. Vanisdale? Could anyone not do June 18th? Edwin. And so this is the thing is like, I don't want to be like, we don't care to lose you, but like, you know what I'm saying? Like, I don't know how to do this. These were, the way that I came up with these dates is I was just looking at the second Thursday of every month. And so maybe the best way to do this fairly for all board members is we just plan for every March, June, September, December, we say the second Thursday. And so that way we just kind of know what that is moving forward. And unless a quorum can't be gained at a meeting, we don't move that. Does anyone have a problem with that?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
I don't have a problem with that. I would tell you that I'm on two other state commissions.
Okay.
And they simply do a doodle poll.
Okay. Yeah.
And the most members that can be there on a date, that's what it is.
Okay. Well, and I'm not opposed to that either. So maybe what we'll do, why don't we do this? Why don't we only schedule, no, because I don't know. All right, here's going to be my recommendation. Y'all feel free to shoot me down. I want to stick with the dates that are on there unless, okay, September. Who can't do the September date? December? March? Okay, so here's what we're going to do. We're going to stick with the dates as recommended. When we get to this time next year, we will send out with this date structure, and we'll let everyone respond then to see if any of them need to be amended. And that is no slight to you, Ms. Vanisdale, but maybe your schedule will change. Who knows?
Well, I appreciate you saying the second Thursday of each of these months because I can plan my summer vacation around that.
Right.
But I have to book a year in advance.
Yeah, no,
I didn't know what day it was going to be.
No, and before I think that if we just start doing that moving forward and then use a doodle poll to confirm that we can get a quorum, I think that's going to be good. But otherwise, so Chairman Moody, I am seeking a motion and a second on the dates as recommended in the packet.
Mr. Chairman, Anthony Pelham, so moved.
Stone seconds.
All right, we have a motion by Pelham, a second by Stone to approve the dates as amended. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carries.
The last thing that I want to say before any other closing things is there was a committee, the Commerce Committee met in the House Commerce Committee met a few days ago. And for those of you that don't know, in the legislature, that's where the majority of our bills that affect us and utilities, it's where they go. And Chairman Vaughn gave the T-Bor a really nice shout out during the meeting. He was very complimentary of the work that we've done. And so I thought that it'd be appropriate for y'all who probably weren't watching the committee meeting, that he was very complimentary of the board and board staff and very appreciative of what we do for the citizens of Tennessee. So with that, anyone have anything for staff? So if the board doesn't have anything?
We have one other,
Yeah,
Mr. Carter, you're recognized.
If you could go back and look at Cherokee Hills 101 and 102, the numbers just look wrong to me on their statements. Your net assets go from 200,000 3 years in a row, and then it goes to 2 million.
Could be a typo.
It looks like a typo.
Yeah.
But I just wanted to point that out because it may be throwing off all the rest of those numbers. And I know we voted on that, but I want to make sure those numbers are right.
Do you mind to pull that up? Because if the numbers are wrong, but the change in net position's the same, then we'll move forward. But before we close,
Cherokee Hills 102.
yeah, I'm looking at it right now. If you want to pull up that audit, 2024 verifies it.
So what was the, all right, so you were saying that the,
So your net assets, even all the numbers jump quite a bit. But if you look at just net assets, we're talking about 279, 295.
They have a massive construction in progress.
Okay.
Yeah.
So those are correct then.
Yeah, no, it looks like they're
Yeah,
doing
so-
something big.
looking at the, if you take the capital contribution, which would have.
Right, I saw the capital contribution for 1 million, so I just
Like,
wanted to make sure.
it wasn't 100.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, no, all that is accurate according to the audit. It's just kind of shocking when you go from having 200 grand worth of stuff to 2.8 million.
Any further discussion by board members? Any further business before we entertain a moment to adjourn? I move to adjourn. Is there a second?
I second you, Chief Hampton.
We are adjourned. Thank you.
All right. Thank you all.